I call this work session meeting of the San Marcos City Council to order. Today is Tuesday, March 4th of 2025. The time is 3 p.m. Ms. Trevino, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Rodriguez. Here. Mr. Saul Gonzalez.
Here.
Ms. Garza. Here. Mayor Houston.
I'm here.
Mr. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Mendoza and Mr. Lorenzo Gonzalez. We have a quorum present.
All righty. First is our citizen comment period. Is Barbara Smithson here? Barbara Smithson, is she here? Online? Not here? Okay, well, she was the only one, so I won't read all the rules and everything. And I'll check in later. And we will go straight to item 1. Ms. Trevino, please.
Receive a presentation from Sunrise Rehab and Recovery, DBA, Evoke Wellness, San Marcos regarding provision of mental health services to persons referred by the police department.
Ms. Reyes.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Our first item is a follow-up to a discussion held in December when we increased the contract amount with Evoke Wellness to provide services for mental health clients with the goal of jail diversion. Additional questions were posed by Council during that December meeting, resulting in today's work session. Evoke Wellness's Executive Director is joining us to address questions you may have regarding their services. We entered into the contract with Evoke in July 2024, and City Council increased the amount from $99,000 to $150,000 in December. This contract is funded through the American Rescue Plan Act funding. It should be noted that of the $150,000 originally budgeted, under half remain. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chief Standridge. Thank you.
All right. Chief Standridge.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Stan Standridge, Police Chief. So she eloquently stated what I was going to read to you. I do want to clarify, because especially for the citizens' perspective, we provide council an agenda request form, an ARF. In the ARF, it incorrectly states that the remaining balance for this contract is $19,000. I learned this morning that when council in December increased the funding amount to $150,000, not to exceed, that was never loaded on the actual contract. So, as Ms. Reyes said, we have about $70,000 remaining, which is a good way to segue into what is the purpose of our collaboration with Evoke Wellness in furtherance of jail diversion. Joining me today are Megan Kowalski. Megan, raise your hand. She's the Executive Director. You're going to hear specifically from her. And also joining her is Jamie Warenberg. I apologize, Jamie. She is the Director of Clinical Services. When I first came to you in December of 2024, you had questions that neither myself nor Corporal Joe Osborne, Joe, raise your hand. He oversees our mental health unit. We could not answer those questions, so you asked for this work session for the purpose of asking the questions directly to Evoke Wellness. And so without further ado, Megan, would you please come up?
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Kowalski. I'm the Executive Director of Evoke Wellness. Thank you, Chief Standridge. We at Evoke Wellness really value our partnership with SMPD and MHU, and I'm here to I've already gotten some questions from the Assistant Chief in regards to council, so if there's anything else that you guys have questions about or that you want to know more about the program that hasn't already been addressed.
Council questions? Ms. Rodriguez?
I'm going through the responses, so thank you for taking the time to put it together. But just because I just admittedly looked at it maybe like 10 minutes ago, can you walk me through just like for somebody who is actually agreeing to receive the services, sort of like from the time they get there to the time they leave, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it can be a little long and arduous process. From the time they come in, they're going to do a pre-screen that's going to determine their eligibility for program services, right? We have different levels of care. So we're licensed by the state of Texas for detox, residential, and intensive outpatient. So depending on the level of care that they're going to provide, let's just say for this intent, if a client's coming in for detoxification services, they're going to be evaluated. They're going to go through an intake process with a BHT. And then they're going to be seen by the nursing staff to get orders from the medical director on what their detox protocol is going to look like, what their medication regimen is going to look like. Detox lasts anywhere from 5 to 7 days. It is a voluntary program, so that's something that, you know, in a previous work session, we've worked with San Marcos PD in regards to. All the clients there are there on their own volition, right? So they have the freedom to leave at any point that they want to. So for detox, that's detox, 5 to 7 days. Residential is typically 21 to 28 days, depending on their commitment, right? So if a client stays for detox and residential, they're gonna be seen within the first 72 hours to do a biopsychosocial assessment. That's gonna go over like a whole familial assessment, all of their trauma, history, drug usage history, any kind of family like relationships, their whole history, so that the clinical like team has a full picture of how to treat that whole person, right? In conjunction with the clinical team and the medical team, like they're evaluated and monitored 24/7. I have 24/7 nursing staff, 24/7 operations staff, so the clients are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Clinical staff's on site and available. We have 4 clinicians on site, Monday through Friday, 4 days a week. And then on the weekends, there's 3. So staff are always present, staff are always available. While they're there, it's almost like school, right? Like we talk to them about like, hey, you're here to learn more about your substance abuse and mental health conditions, and to learn like the tools and the coping skills to hopefully, you know, achieve long-term sobriety, right? So while they're there, we're required to do 6 hours a day of programming. Clients get up in the morning, they eat breakfast, they see the nurses, staff for any medications that they might have. Programming starts at 9:30 and it ends at 5:30. We have community involvement through 12-step panels where they come in to the facility and hold meetings with the clients. And then throughout that time, they're seen by the clinical staff. They get a therapist and a case manager. Case manager helps facilitate the discharge process. Therapist meets with them weekly and then as needed during the week for any kind of crisis intervention or stuff that comes up. And then they're in group therapy 52 hours?
6 hours a day.
6 hours a day, yeah, so I'm not good at math. 6 times 7, 42, right? 42 hours of programming. And then at that point, we encourage all of our clients, like longer lengths of stay produce better outcomes. So typically Evoke is 28 to 35 days. So at that point, the treatment team and the discharge coordinator is gonna work with the client on the best possible outcome for them and their discharge plan. And 9 times out of 10, our clients take the recommendation, the clinical recommendation with their treatment team for a step-down placement. And that's PHP, which I know may be some, like foreign to some people, partial hospitalization, which is another lower level of care. It offers a little bit of structure, but it starts giving them a little bit of freedom more and more as they go down through the levels of care. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's,
That was
That was
phenomenal.
good?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
It prompted additional questions, so I
Oh,
thank you.
okay.
I thank you. Not too many though. Not too many.
I will say too, I'm sorry if I'm interjecting. We
you're
did
okay.
give Elizabeth, Ms. Trevino, some packets, family packets, as well as our client handbook that all of our clients receive upon intake, as well as some data sheets of just some stuff that we gathered from January 2024 till present.
And have you, regarding the biopsychosocial examination, I mean, I imagine some really heavy things come up in those conversations. I don't know if you're necessarily the person that's like privy to some of those things, but I kind of wanted to ask, in your opinion, how many of those people who participate in those are participating in that for the first time? Like, are for the first time being able to reflect on everything that may have impacted their behavior?
I'm gonna let Jamie speak to this, because she's our clinical director and she runs all the clinical services. I have the answer, but I think she'll say it a lot better than I will.
So it really depends whether they've been in treatment before. So if this is their first time entering treatment or attempting treatment, this is probably the first time that they've been asked those questions in depth and have really had time to reflect on like how it all kind of encompasses and what led them to here today seeking treatment. However, sometimes we do have folks that maybe have attempted to receive services at a lower level of care. They tried outpatient therapy and they keep relapsing or they keep struggling with their mental health, family relations issues, and so it requires a step up to a higher level of care. So a lot of individuals are familiar with the process because this might not be their first attempt in a form of treatment.
Okay. And are y'all LCSWs or what's the,
We have staff that are, I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor, so we have LPCs, LCSWs, and we also have licensed chemical dependency counselors,
wow,
LCDCs.
okay, thank you. And then I know we talked about sort of how many staff are there on a day-to-day basis. What's the typical client to staff ratio that?
Typically, so the behavioral health techs are the ones that are in charge of monitoring like all of the patients in the milieu. That's an 8-to-1 ratio. And then on top of that, you have 24/7 nursing staff. There's 2 nurses on in the morning, 1 nurse on at night, medical director available on call 24/7. And then the clinical staff and my leadership team, which consists of myself, the director of operations, clinical director, the nursing director, and our kitchen manager.
Okay. And then lastly, so regarding the discharge plan, so I guess there's two different ways to ask this question. So for the people who are not really willing or ready at that time to go through the whole process, are they afforded the same ability to receive a discharge plan, or is it sort of?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
So that is a requirement, like, we're licensed by the state of Texas, HHSC. That is a requirement for everybody, is they have to participate in a treatment plan and a discharge plan prior to discharge. That includes some questions that had been asked about follow-up appointments and access to, like, even if they refuse referrals, we still will give the referrals. But more often than not, the clients will accept the treatment recommendation, and if they don't, the treatment team will work with them on some referrals in their area where they feel like are gonna be the best fit, and that's included in their discharge plan. Access to therapy, medications, and then any kind of like intensive outpatient that they might wanna do on their own from home, right? Maybe they don't wanna go back to a treatment center environment, but they wanna return home and then come in on an outpatient basis, which is typically 3 hours a night.
Okay. And, sorry, that prompted another one.
Okay.
For people who are indigent, you know, maybe they need medicine throughout the rest of however long, do y'all provide them with that before they leave? And if so, you know, how does a discharge plan look for somebody who identifies, hey, I don't have any resources?
Yeah, so, and that was something, yeah, that I addressed. A lot of our clients, like, individually, they're indigent, right? They may have family resources and support. Some of them do, where families, like, they've exhausted all their resources, and the family may be willing to help pay for medications. For the ones that are truly indigent or homeless and have nothing, no family, no one to help them, for all clients, detox medications are covered. So for their first 5 to 7 days, all their detox medications are provided at them free of charge. They do sign when they come in, upon admission, a consent that's a client funds acknowledgement. They are responsible for their medications, but if it's somebody that just doesn't have the resources and the medical teams feels like it's a medically necessary medication that they have to have, we will provide it for them while they're there. And then also help work with them, the discharge coordinator will work with them on community services to continue those medications. And our nurse practitioner is phenomenal in finding these loopholes and different like scholarships and grants that will help with funding for clients that don't have any resources at all.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time to answer all these questions, and I'll definitely, you know, take the time to review in great detail what you provided us, so thank you for also answering those. But that's all the questions I had, Mayor.
Okay, anyone else?
I do have a question.
Sure.
So, around like mid last year, this is for Chief, I asked for more information about Evoke. You gave me like a nice little blurb. I'm just unclear about where it stands. You said, they offer services related to addiction recovery, detox, and mental health. Right now, their medical licensing is specific to behavioral health, like dependency issues, but they are licensed to treat clients who also have MH issues, dual diagnoses. The two must be co-occurring. They'll be seeking an MH license this year, thus giving them a two-pronged program. Did that happen? Like that's a thing, right? Like that's what we're doing?
So many things have transpired since, but I honestly think Megan is probably the best person to answer that. I know the answer, but I'm going to defer to the executive director.
No, no worries.
So we are licensed to provide services to individuals experiencing co-occurring disorders. So an individual must have a substance use disorder. However, one thing that's worth noting is that over 90% of our clients in who we served last year did have a co-occurring mental health disorder. It's actually pretty rare for someone to have a substance use disorder without some type of co-occurring mental health disorder. We do not currently serve individuals who have only a primary mental health disorder with no substance use disorder linked to that.
Gotcha.
That was my question.
Oh, gotcha.
Thank you.
So just trying to explain to like our neighbors, like, what the benefit is for San Marcos, because I saw in the chart, like, that we have several clients from out of state. Oh, San Marcos PD has only done 2 referrals, but that doesn't mean that like the folks that were referred through and the mental health court, they could be San Marcans, right?
100%.
Yeah. I'll say I can take that or.
Yes, ma'am. So for the benefit of the citizens, we're approaching this from a two-pronged perspective. The overriding goal is jail diversion. We
Right.
don't believe that incarceration will fix any of these issues. They're rooted in behavioral health issues. And so the mental health court is attacking this from that angle. We're also attacking it from this angle. The Hays County government allocated additional funds in this fiscal year outside of ARPA funds. Our funds will expire as soon as ARPA funds expire. So we're trying a multi-pronged approach to provide as many services. And we may be beyond the 2 now. Joe, we're now at 3 clients.
Gotcha. And I guess, how does that work then? Like, we're paying for the ones that we refer?
Well, it depends. She made reference plenty of times to whether or not they are indigent. So if they have qualifying insurance, we can still refer them to Evoke Wellness.
Okay.
Wherein the ARPA, American Relief Plan Act, funds would not be used to cover somebody whose insurance would cover it.
Oh, gotcha.
But if they are truly indigent and have no ability to provide pay, then Corporal Osborne and his team will vet that person, and then Evoke is going to vet them additionally to determine if they qualify.
Cool.
But we only provide it for residents of San Marcos.
Excellent. Okay, cool. No, I appreciate that. I think for me, just to kind of gauge like the efficacy or just like kind of the need, it would be helpful even to capture for the future, like those that you all have connected and serve in San Marcos, like beyond what's being paid for by ARPA, because I do think that is also helpful in seeing just like the services that Evoke is providing for San Marcos. But I understand like for this, the purpose of this, it was because
Yeah.
we're talking about the funding source.
Right. So let me relate one specific story that will actually bring a greater emphasis to this. I will call our citizen Mr. M. If you do his name, you would know why I'm calling him Mr. M. Mr. M was arrested for DWI by the San Marcos Police Department in January of 2024. Mr. M was arrested again for another intoxication offense on January 24th, 2024. Mr. M resulted in 2 additional calls for service in May of 2024, all of them related to alcohol. Fast forward, Corporal Joe Osborne, San Marcos Mental Health Unit, and the embedded mental health clinician and his 2 officers, they got involved. They would ultimately contact Mr. M on a mental health investigation call. They would eventually provide an emergency detention order to get him inpatient treatment, hopefully breaking that cycle of dependence. We all know that's not long enough, so they didn't stop there. The mental health unit, when he was ultimately released from the inpatient care, they then got him services at Evoke. He is one of the 3. Today, fast forward, I asked them to run the numbers. They have done 25 follow-up calls just for Mr. M. What does that mean? They're doing active case management. We're doing business very differently. He's sober, he's living independently, and we believe he can make a recovery. Thanks to you and your team, thanks to Joe and his team. So that's an example of what we're trying to do, because all of us would concede just putting him back in jail every time is not going to fix anything. We've got to fix the root behavior, or addiction in this case.
When you say they were checking up on him, is that us or Evoke?
That's us,
Okay.
Corporal Joe Osborne and his team, 25 unrelated calls just to do the active case management, making sure he's on track.
No, that's great. It just, they was,
Yes, ma'am.
sometimes, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chief, and I appreciate the focus on the root cause and that the energy that you've brought to like the mental health coordinating committee, I think that's what it's called, which is a group of elected officials from across Hayes, our chief, our health department, and some other folks. I think it's important for me to name that I'm very hopeful when we talk about these things and talk about root causes. We got a lot of emails within the past couple of days from concerned citizens talking about budget cuts and talking about like we need to empower our police department with the resources that they need to ensure community wellness. I think investing in programs like this captures like community wellness really well, more holistic. But I also think, just for the folks, because I know some of the folks here emailed in, these are also the things that we contemplate when we think about people like Mr. M. The root cause, part of the root cause is mental health issues, but it also is like structural issues, right? Like access to jobs, access to food, access to housing. And so that's just kind of what we have to weigh when we're making budgetary decisions. But programs like this, I appreciate y'all bringing to the table to at least start to chip away at those like structural root causes, mental health and just basic living needs.
When I would be remiss if I didn't introduce everybody to our district attorney. Mr. Kelly Higgins is here. Mr. Higgins is also part of the Behavioral Advisory Team and the Mental Health Coordinating Committee. I know he emphasizes mental health and services therein, so his office has been a game changer working with us as well. So thank you, Mr. Higgins.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
For sure, the, what is it, the PDA office, what is it, the Public Defender's Office, yes. They have been, I think, really helpful too in all of this, and also seeking those resources. A lot of the folks, they, like y'all said, they don't have access to mental health services. They don't have access to, I think you gave me some blurbs once upon a time about there's like no rehab options in this area, and a lot of our neighbors don't have access to health insurance, so I appreciate it. But I will also just name, in all of this work, it does make me anxious thinking about how we're seeing increases in like those support services, like the need for them, but like not an increase in supporting the support services. So, while I'm happy to fund like and support Evoke Wellness, I think we all feel like a big sense of pressure and also figuring out ways to secure resources for all those wraparound services, like the food bank, housing, to complement y'all's work, because similar to the mental health court, it's almost like we're setting them up for failure if we're not figuring out how to bring more resources that our neighbors need to, get right.
Well, and I love the way you just described it, to complement our work. I think the work is complementary. It's not an either or, it's an and. And so I appreciate your characterization.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez, did you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Scott?
No, I'm tickled to death,
Yeah.
just listening to it.
Did you say tickled?
How it all came together, and it's really complete now. You put it together really well, Stan.
Oh, this is a team, trust me.
Now, and this is a lot of effort by a number of people. I thank them all for their participation, because it's a lot of cogs together. But in the end, what it is it's making our community better by helping individuals in our community get better. So this is wonderful. And I thank you to the people who passed the ARP Act for some funding so that we could get this started. And I don't think that we really needed to prove it. I think we were all assuming that it would work, but at least we really do have, proof of the work now. So we'll just have to figure out how we go in the future. But yes, this has all been very good. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you to all who have made this work. So,
And Mayor, if I could,
You go
there
right
may
ahead.
be one of our community members watching this or hearing about this
yes,
and going back and watching it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're that person and you need help, please do me a favor. You can email me directly. You can call me directly. You can email or call Corporal Joe Osborne, Osborne, directly. We are about jail diversion if your issues are rooted in a behavioral health issue. So
Correct.
courtesy of you all giving us those monies, there are still monies available. If you live in San Marcos and you need that help, please reach out.
but if someone doesn't know those email addresses and phone numbers, et cetera, if they are a family member, is perhaps to the point of calling 911, what do they say that will get them to the right place the quickest?
It's not gonna be quick because they're gonna walk through a script with the telecommunicator. They're gonna get asked a bunch of questions that they perceive as unrelated to the core issue. I just ask the citizen to be patient because they're following a national script. But just simply say, hey, I heard something about at city
Right.
council, the chief was talking about mental health services, mention Evoke Wellness, and our dispatchers will get Joe and I the information.
All right. All right, thank
Mayor,
you very much.
one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
So when we talk about mental health, what do we mean? Like what level of severity, or what do we mean?
And
Like if
this-
I'm a citizen and I feel like, okay, not everything's right, is there a level, a threshold I have to meet of being unwell, or what?
Yeah, so mental health is actually defined statutorily. And that's a very good question. Because if you go to Hill Country, our local mental health authority, which is funded through the Health and Human Services Commission from the state, they represent the entire Hays County area. If you were to go to them and say, I need help with mental health services, they're gonna ask you a host of questions to determine, do you have a qualifying condition? So mental health is not a generic, hey, I'm struggling. Mental health is gonna be characterized as a clinical major depression, schizophrenia, bipolar. Those are the type of classifications that we use in this concept. And I don't want to get out of my depth, so Corporal Joe Osborne, I'm teeing you up, be thinking through this, come on up here with me.
Well,
But-
before he goes and before my colleague, the reason I asked the question is because when we talk about mental health, I know statutorily it's defined as such, but leaving it up to the legislature to define something like that, I always, want to hear another definition. Because when we talk about, if the public's watching and for everyone here, when we talk about mental health, we need to understand that it's very much a spectrum. It's not the severity that we typically hear. When we talk about mental health, it could be myself. I mean, just to be so frank, it can be myself. And so the reason I am so persistent on us really understanding it as a spectrum that it is because it requires a response that understands it as such. So I love the work that y'all do, and I really appreciate you taking the time. But I really hope that, members, we can do something to really treat it as what it is, and people need help all across the different levels that it's experienced. And so I just wanted to put that out there for people watching. It's not just those severe things that we're talking about.
Right. But for the call that Chief made to the public, you're specifically referring to those who have mental health issues and substance abuse issues, right? Those that can be treated through Evoke?
Yes, ma'am, the fancy
Okay.
word we keep using is co-occurring.
Gotcha.
Yes.
I would also like to suggest to anyone who works at the university or one of our large employers, the university has a program, and I don't know all the details because I've been gone for 9 years, but I'm sure that the program is still there, that you can receive some services, and it's confidential. If you don't want to ask HR, go to the HR website. You should be able to find it under the health programs. And I'm sure that there are other large employers also. So if you're fortunate enough to work at one of those places, there may be some options for you within your workplace.
Yes, ma'am. What? I'm sorry. Did you have
wanna
anything to add,
mental-
Joe? Go, no, come
Yeah.
up here. You wanted to add anything?
So, good afternoon. As Chief mentioned, I'm Joseph Osborne. I'm part of the mental health unit at the police department. I just wanted to add one or two things to what he said. At the police department, we're all about helping people with whatever it is that they're dealing with. But we're also police officers, so we understand that not everybody wants to speak with us. So I just wanted to throw out there that there's the crisis line 988 for our citizens as well, which is just a simple 3-digit code, like similar to 911, but this one's for mental health crisis, so people can call that, or they can text it, or they can initiate just a chat with it, however it looks like is most easiest for them. And then that connects them with mental health professionals who screen them, and then either just, if all they need is somebody to talk to, it just talks to them and continues on. The people handle it that way and end up referring them to resources. But if they determine that, you know, it's something more severe and it needs a responder right away, then they do transfer it to law enforcement for that immediate assistance. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. I really appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
I've heard good things about your work.
Thank you.
And so I hear about the patience in which you display. And I mean this genuinely, I really appreciate your work. The last time you came to present, I don't think I got the opportunity to tell you that I appreciated what you said in that presentation. Even the fact that you can acknowledge that you as an officer, sometimes people may be hesitant to accept those services. That tells me that you understand that. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
And Chief, could you just, for those at home, would you go over what happens when there is a call as to who responds to this type of call? If you didn't already, I'm sorry, I had technical difficulties here. I may have missed it if you covered it earlier. If you did, just let me know, and that's fine.
I did not, Mayor.
Thank you.
And thank you for the question. Our ultimate goal is when a crisis call is received in the dispatch center, and by the way, Audrey's going to actually directly address this in her presentation. But
Okay.
our ultimate goal is to be able to refer that call to that mental health crisis line that Corporal Osborne just referenced. And so the protocols are actually there. The policy is actually there. So that when we do receive the crisis call, if an offense has not been committed and there are no weapons involved, then the dispatcher can call the crisis line and do what's called a warm handoff.
Right.
Audrey will speak more to that specific issue when she gets up here, so I'm gonna
Okay.
defer to the expert.
Okay, we can wait.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? Again, thanks to all of you for what you do. We appreciate it. We appreciate the changes that have been initiated. They are certainly benefiting our community, so thank you. And with that, we'll close out item 1, and Ms. Trevino will go to item 2.
Receive a public safety update from the police department concerning year 2024.
Ms. Reyes.
Our next item is a public safety report from the Police Department for 2024. Chief Standridge and other staff members from the San Marcos Police Department will provide specific data associated with crime, mental health services, calls for service, accountability measures, police initiatives, and victim services to address safety in our growing community. The great news is that overall crime is trending down. However, those decreases are not across the board in all categories. In addition to presenting statistics, we intend for this briefing to highlight some of the specific services provided, as well as highlighting the department's efforts to increase accountability and professionalism. We have a very comprehensive report with a lot of information, so I'm going to turn it over to Chief Standridge to begin the presentation. In addition, per the voter-approved ordinance on marijuana, we must also provide an update in a public setting on the ordinance. So Chief Standridge is also going to update on this matter today. And then the other thing is I just wanted to make sure that I recognized it's going to be a kind of a tag team effort between Commander Tiffany Williams, Assistant Chief Bob Klett, Records and Communications Manager Audrey Verver, Corporal Joe Osborne, Assistant Chief Brandon Winkenwerder, Crime Analyst Supervisor Patty Hom, and then also Sergeant Tony Scott. So thank you.
Okay. It's a big topic, a lot of people needed to cover it.
So I just would ask for a lot of grace. We've not done this before, so I hope that it is beneficial to you all, because if you have specific questions for the SMEs, the subject matter experts, you can directly ask them. I'm going to begin with a very quick story. It does have a direct correlation to what I'll speak about, and I'm going to start with a story that Simon Sinek tells. He tells about two lumberjacks who come to work every day, and they start and they stop their day at the exact times. But every day, one of the lumberjacks disappears for about an hour. Yet he chops the same amount of wood as the other guy who stays the whole time. Finally, after days go by, the one guy just says, finally, I've got to know, where are you going for this hour? He turns and he says, oh, that's easy. I'm going home to sharpen my axe. I think that's directly relational to what we're going to discuss today, because I can only speak for the last 4 years. I think we have sharpened our axe. Ultimately, you and our citizens, our community members, are going to have to determine if that's true. We are not perfect. We fall short daily. And as long as we continue to recruit from the human race, we will continue to fall short. But I hope the story related to Mr. M is proof that we are trying to move the needle. And I would submit to you, because all of my command staff is here today, I believe they have moved the needle. I'm very proud of each and every one of them. So you're going to hear about a lot of things, all of which are in the context of what is your strategic goal. And I shared this mostly for the benefit of the citizens. City Council has a 2025 strategic plan. One of those goals is to address public safety, core services, and fiscal excellence. As it relates to community safety, and I'll read verbatim what's on the plan, it says to collaborate to prioritize and enhance public safety services while building resiliency and trust within our community. Again, we fall short. So in a little while, there's going to be a slide, and I'm going to evidence how we fall short, and I'm going to apologize on behalf of myself and the department because we got something wrong. It will make a whole lot more sense, but I'm going to set you up now just to simply say, I'm going to live this by an example. I will go first. With that said, our goal today is to discuss mental health, crime, and call volume. You'll hear from Audrey Verver. We will finish with a discussion about school resource officers, and you're actually going to hear from the supervisor who oversees the school resource officer program. Chief Klett will talk about accreditation. He has some good news to share there. And then Commander Tiffany Williams will talk specifically about internal processes. And she's going to set this up by explaining in the last 17 years what's been her experience compared to the last 4. So we're going to look inward, and then we're going to look outward. And this actually came from staff. Staff said when we do this presentation, we should focus on the inward changes that have had to manifest over the last 4 years, for which they have done all of the hard work. Then we turn it and look outward. So we'll talk about crime, we'll talk about call volume, we'll talk about mental health. We'll talk about a huge, huge goal for calendar year 2025. And Chief Winkenwerder will share that goal when it comes to mental health peace officers. Patty Hom is our crime analyst supervisor. She will come up and she will get granular as it relates to crime. And then we'll finish with the school resource officers, and then I'll come back up, present a couple of quick slides to provide an update on the marijuana decriminalization. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Commander Tiffany Williams.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? All right. I'm gonna introduce myself, and then I'm gonna add a couple of caveats, and I'm going to ask for a couple accountability buddies. My name's Tiffany Williams, 17 years at the police department. I'm a commander right now on day shift. That's a whole new thing to me. Previously spent the vast majority of my career on nights. Formal education, graduated from Missouri State University. When I started, it was Southwest Missouri State University. Perhaps that sounds familiar. But my degree was focused in criminology. It was a heavy mix of criminal justice and sociology. I appreciated the program because it mixed in the components of the human society, social problems, as you were also studying criminal justice, because they go hand in hand. I'm preaching to the choir. Also did minors in Asian studies and Spanish, amassed some additional student debt in doing some study abroads to immerse myself in some of those things. I was young at that time, and it was a good time, but in retrospect, I do think I was a bit crazy, quite frankly. But that being said, that's my formal education. I did an internship with a federal agency, and I thought I would come to San Marcos and become a cop, take that experience, make myself more marketable, and then leave. However, something happened, and I'm still here 17 years later. I don't have children in the schools. I don't have family here. I've never had family here, but for whatever reason, I have chosen to stay here and make my investment here. I can't explain the why. I can just tell you it was a choice, and is it a choice I would make again? So that's why I'm here. I have no tethers, but I chose to tether myself to this community. I see the value, but we're gonna keep digging for more value. So what I'm going to ask of you all is, I have never been accused of being concise a day in my life, if that's not already abundantly evident. So I know that Chief Anderson and Ms. Reyes, you both agreed to give me verbal and audible cues as I go through these slides. If you see me laboring too long, just a or perhaps a one of these would be helpful. Anybody else wants to join in that endeavor, please do. So, 17 years I have been here. The last 5 years, they have been rough. And I say rough, but they have been an incredible amount of work. Internally, Chief Standridge came in, and while we had a lot of predecessors, to have a chief come in that came with some comprehensive ideas on not just how to engage the community, but how do you better serve a community if you are not turning inward and addressing how you do business, how you do it better, how do you have healthier cops, mentally and physically. It has long been a thing that has been really unaddressed in the profession, and to a certain extent has been taboo. So I appreciated that, because the last 5 years, that comprehensiveness has not been there. And it's there now, and it's been an exceptional amount of work, and I am heavily invested in it. And so I'm gonna walk you through what some of those things look like. So the first slide here, you see, to be better and do better, we start with us. That's that looking inward. Accountability, as several of you, I think many of you have varying degrees at different levels, but a lot of times the translation from academia to practical application is not there. So what does accountability look like in practical application? It's a fair question. And not only that, but how do we do it differently? How do we do it better? How do we push forward that? One of the programs that we brought internally is active bystandardship in law enforcement. I understand that a few of you really appreciate acronyms, so I am going to try my best to always provide an explanation of that acronym as we move forward so that you have a foundation of context. So what is active bystandardship in law enforcement? Reasonable question, because even when it came to us, I thought, what is this program? Because it sounds like it could be just a bunch of nonsense. It is rooted in social science, and it covers human beings. While police officers have long had a law on a duty to intervene, it has not been enough. There is not enough practical application. What does it look like? We have an expectation as police officers to intervene, and yet in all of these social science, these different experiments that this program is based off of, you see that human beings struggle. They struggle in various circumstances to intervene and to speak up across the board. Police are no exception. What is different is that the expectation for police is different, and we have to rise to that. So how do we do it? Well, why is it needed? We need to reduce our mistakes. I don't think any of us would debate that. We need to prevent misconduct. Misconduct wears away at that trust that the public gives us. We've got to promote health and wellness. We're promoting in the community, you've got to promote it within. You can't have a good, if you have a bad heart, you are going to see that in the extremities. So if we are not good as a police department, the chances of us having a negative impact on the community are increased. But if we are better in the police department, the chances of us doing better for the community are much more likely. So how do we do it? Strategic intervention to prevent actions that cause harm to community members, harm to law enforcement, damage public trust, and might damage the profession of policing. I don't need to tell this group that you can watch across the nation and you can watch the mistakes other police officers have made, our own mistakes. And just because you may not be the police officer that did it does not mean that you will be absolved of the damage that that has done to public trust. So this program sets up us to receive intervention because it protects what we're shifting is the paradigm, right? Shifting the paradigm of, well, I don't want to intervene, it's scary, they're a different rank than me, and it now goes, yeah, but the consequences of you not intervening will far outweigh if you just intervene. You can stop all those bad consequences, so shift the paradigm. So it's embedded in research. We have also added scenarios to our patrol practicals that we do with every set of new officers. We do a practical, we do a refresher training every year with all of our officers. And like I said, it is embedded in that social science. I do believe we provided you all with the full-on information on it because I don't want to dive into it too much because I will get this from at least a few people over there. But if your question is, well, but does it work? Does anyone here remember the don't let friends don't let friends drive drunk? That is exactly active bystandership. It is empowering your peers, your friends, to intervene on your behalf. The aviation field has taken this on, active bystandership, so has the medical community, of speak up on your peers' behalf. It hasn't been brought to law enforcement until I don't know when it was conceptualized and then started in practical application. I know they had it at Dallas, but it was Chief Standridge who brought it here, and it has normalized conversations that have not been normal in my 17 years. Of talking about being emotionally hijacked, overinvested in the moment, the expectation to intervene, the practice to intervene. It's different, and it's something that has been a shift in the last 5 years. So while we are talking about other things that are internal, obviously internal affairs, the Office of Professional Conduct. This is the breakdown spanning from 2021 to 2024 that gives you a snapshot of 42 of our IA investigations. The majority of those were based in investigations related to violation of rules of conduct. That policy is embedded in here, so should you want to read that policy in greater detail, by all means, please do. But it covers everything from rudeness to harassment to everything in the spectrum. I don't think that's a broad enough spectrum to provide you. It's just what my mind can provide you right now. But it covers all of that conduct. And that is what 38 of those 42 investigations were rooted in. You will see that in 2024, there is a blue box. If you can't read it, I know you all have screens that are probably, you're able to see it much better, but there are 3. Those 3 are substantiated complaints, 3 for 2023, 7 for 22, and 13 in 2021. Allow me to explain a little bit of what complaints, when we say substantiated, the definition of substantiated means that this was the allegation of the conduct, and after investigation, the conduct absolutely occurred and was a violation of policy and potentially even law. So that's what substantiated means. The allegation is in fact true and merits corrective or disciplinary action. Another definition you will see up there is unsubstantiated. Unsubstantiated means we're unable to verify the truth of the matter under investigation. This is one where you may not have any actual evidence. There isn't any video. It is A citizen says, I feel this officer was rude to me because of the way they said something. Perhaps that interaction isn't captured on camera, or perhaps it was in a passing just at a restaurant, and there's no way for us to verify. Was it rude? Was it tone? Was it demeanor? You can't substantiate it. You cannot discern fact from fiction in that moment. There isn't enough information to make that determination. Unfounded is not reflected up there. We did not put the number of unfounded complaints, but unfounded means that there was an allegation and there was just no truth to it. And then exonerated means that the behavior did occur, but it was within policy, and all complaints that come out as exonerated are reviewed by the chief to determine if we actually need a policy change. Was this a misunderstanding of, I am upset this action happened? No, that was appropriate per the circumstances encountered and the law that was applied. And so you can still be upset about the outcome, but it not be wrong. So the complaint is exonerated, but nonetheless, do we still need to look back at policy and determine if there are still changes that need to be made? So that is a snapshot of 2021 through 2024 from our Office of Professional Conduct. As I continue on, I'm going to let this slide sit up there, and I also want to be fair to the fact that we started with one internal affairs investigator in 2021. We now have 4. The reason being is, again, Chief recognized, if we're going to do this right, you can't just have one person who is responsible for something of that magnitude. You have to have more folks. They also need to be certified to handle these investigations, to be trained in them. So that has also led to some increased legitimacy in our walls, even though our officers, myself included, have been subject to exactly these same rules, and I've been taken to task. It was not comfortable, but it was needed. What you see reflected up here is of these 42 investigations, 62, or 26 to be exact, were substantiated, meaning that they merited corrective or disciplinary action. You can see the breakdown for yourselves, but it does run the gamut, from termination to resignation, all the way to a verbal counseling. So we've talked about ABLE, and we've talked about our Office of Professional Conduct, but now we need to talk more specifically about the how. This is one that is near and dear to my heart and keeps me at work late many, many times. The Event Review Board. I am the chairperson who sits on our Event Review Board. Again, the policy is embedded here for anyone who would like to read exactly the policy over the Event Review Board. I also, if it's all right with you, I won't read to you directly from the slides, but the Event Review Board is meant to be a board to provide more consistent and regular review of significant incidents. They review every use of force, every pursuit, every preventable crash. Looking at what are we doing, not just individually, but as a department. That is what the Event Review Board is tasked with. The makeup of that board is, like I said, myself as the chair. The co-chair is another commander, Commander Sam Myers. So if ever I have to be absent, I think I've missed one. He will take over my duties. Then we also have a sergeant, 2 officers, a detective, and our very own Mandy Risky. I hate to call her out when she's not even here. But we do have our risk manager who sits on that board as well. The reason for the variety of people to sit on there is we want all of the lenses to be looking at something. If we identify that something is not acceptable, have we applied it through all of our lenses across the ranks, across the experiences, to identify and more clearly articulate what wasn't okay? So let's get into the how. What do we do? So our discussion is meant to identify 5 things. I am typing the entire time that we sit in these event review boards, taking notes, capturing what our individual members, the context of the conversation, what questions do we have? But we are identifying, first thing is there a policy violation related to the incident? No matter small or large, is there a policy violation? Should there be corrective action or discipline? Is there a training issue or deficiency related to the incident? Again, not only is it a training issue for the individual, is it something that is departmental? Is it something that we need to go back to the department and say, we've been training wrong, the way this policy is being applied across the department needs improvement? If it's a crash, again, as I said, we look at the preventable, what happened, and then we look at that data at the end of every year and determine, is there anything there that we can dive into to decrease our number of preventable crashes? Is there any reoccurring behavior that we can identify that commonality? And then the last one, if we're going to look at things holistically, you can't always just look at all of the negative. You also have to look, like many human beings, when it comes to good behavior, you want to be recognized for that commendable behavior. That is the last thing that the board will look at. Is there any behaviors demonstrated in whatever we are reviewing that are commendable that we need to recognize with the purpose of trying to get them to be replicated? As I mentioned, we review every use of force. In 2024, we had 69 incidents of reportable use of force. This is 9 more than 2023. 2023, obviously, I know it's basic math, but I still struggle, so I'm glad it's on the screen. That would have meant that we had 60. Our largest increase were incidents where a subject claimed or sustained injury. And I believe there was a previous question on that of what does that mean? It means that our officers understanding that we will abide by the lower threshold. So whether someone gets a 1-inch cut during whatever we are handcuffing someone, you will report it. If they claim you bruised my wrist, whether you can see it or not, you will report it. You will abide by the lower threshold. In 2024, of an estimated 54,511 community member contacts, I have to give that context, which I tried to get to too quickly to commingle the words. Those community member contacts are calls for service, meaning there was a call for service asking us to come to whatever the situation was. That call for service could represent 1 person, could represent 5, could represent 10. We don't get to dictate how many people are on whatever call that we go to. But of those 54,511 calls for service, those community member contacts, if you do the math as I made someone else do because I'm not good at it, that equates to 0.13% of the time that we are having a call for service generated community contact, and it is resulting in a use of force. Also begs the question, if you are curious as to our use of force policy, our use of force policy was also, the current use of force policy was edited and reviewed by a citizen-appointed committee. And that is still the same policy that was agreed upon then, is still the one that is currently in play. Pursuit analysis, in 2024, we had 21 vehicle pursuits. That is 14 more than 2023. That is substantial. The largest reason were stolen vehicles. Now, I know when I looked at it, I immediately was like, I know why that is. But we are identifying stolen vehicles along with many other crimes because of our technology leveraging. We can respond to and be better prepared to respond quicker to things that we know that are happening. And so our ability to catch more stolen vehicles has to do with our more timely notification through the technology that we now have in San Marcos. Whether the victim was here in San Marcos or those offenders came here, we are more adept and better informed to be able to stop that in the moment. Most of the pursuits were 5 miles or less in duration. And of all the 21 pursuits, they were in policy. However, this year was a really interesting conversation at a supervisor meeting where we had to discuss a specific pursuit that became quite contentious because the way that policy was being applied, this started in our event review board, the way that it was applied, we frequently talk about need versus risk. What is the need to take this person or persons into custody versus the risk posed to the public? A pursuit occurs typically in the public. So what is our need versus our risk? And when this came about, and it came to him and the assistant chief's attention, they were going, this is not okay. We need to better clarify what does need versus risk. How are we applying that across the agency? Because if you don't provide better guardrails on the application of need versus risk, then lots of different definitions. My need versus my risk metric will be different than yours, or yours perhaps. So we need to have a better, consistent working definition of that. That was heard. It was a confrontational and adversarial conversation, but it led to a very good outcome where then it meant that we had to go back and identify better guardrails and more clarity in policy. It worked as it should. Wasn't comfortable, but it worked as it should. Officer injuries. I think officer injuries is a bit of a inaccuracy. This is every report of injury that an officer filed. So they may not have actually sought out additional treatment, but it does need to capture all of that. So that's why you will see the breakdown up there in what it is. So when I say that first report of injury could also be exposures. So this year we had officers exposed to tuberculosis, HIV, meningitis. That is encompassing all of those times that officers became aware, whether they sustained a physical injury or an exposure, that encompasses all of that data. You can read the chart for yourself of the different injuries, and those injuries, again, run the gamut from I think I sprained my knee, to I need physical therapy, to I need surgery. That is everything under one umbrella. Fleet accidents. We have them. Of the 51 fleet accidents in 2024, 27 of them were deemed to be preventable. That is 9 more than 2023. I think it probably merits a little bit more clarity on what is preventable versus non-preventable. Non-preventable is the rock that flies up when you're driving down 35. I actually think a small rock is probably the best case scenario if you've driven on 35. And you sustain a broken windshield or deer, as we do have large packs of deer running around San Marcos. And so those would all be considered non-preventable crashes. But preventable are all of the things of where did the officers driving, it was the major contributing factor that led to that crash. And so that is what accounts for those 27 accidents. I can go into more clarification on the chart breakdown, but for the sake of time and clarity, I do have a breakdown of what exactly those mean. But unless that merits happening right now, I will continue forward. Of all of that, SMPD did log 1.5 fuel miles in 2024. So again, our analysts, they are the ones that are good with numbers, and I appreciate them doing the math for me, but that averages about 1 crash per 30,000 miles. Other items that were new to our department were new tools that came to us. Always looking for the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more options you have. It can be, typically is a very good thing. So in May, we started rolling out the TASER 10. Perhaps some of you don't know what that means. If you don't, so please forgive me if you do, but allow me to explain for those that don't. Our previous TASER had 2 cartridges in it. It means that you had 2 opportunities to deploy that tool to incapacitate or stop whatever is occurring. The TASER 10 has 10 probes. It is far more probes to give far more options of success when deploying that TASER. It also increased the range. Our previous TASER had a range of 25 feet. This now increases that range to 40 feet. That rollout started in May. I think we finished it, I didn't look at the exact dates, but October or November, that now every officer that is on patrol, our mental health, and our SROs all have those tools. Another item that we did get in 2024, yes, sir?
Interject real quick. Sorry, let me just quickly interject because otherwise we'll miss this. The council asked the question about what is the unit cost of the TASER 10. We were not able to provide that information through the message board because, make a long story short, all the way through the night, Sheila was going through the actual contract to figure out, okay, where does it list the actual unit cost? It doesn't. The contract that was included with Axon is a bundled contract. And so Chief Anderson and I wanted to share this with you because we wanted to be fully transparent. The officer safety plan that was bundled cost $343,123 for 123 officers, which is a breakdown of $2,786 per officer per year. Remember, we're on a 5-year lease program. This cost for each officer includes the TASER 10 that Commander Williams just described, 2 body cameras, because you're going to receive a body camera at the start of the contract and a new one at the start of year 3 because of the shelf lives of those cameras. It also includes the unlimited storage for all the videos and the downloads related to the TASER, the camera, training to include certified instructors, and virtual reality training modules, plus, and this is the big key, the licensing for software for the TASER, body camera, virtual reality training, and video evidence storage. So I apologize for not being able to get that to you all, but last night we ultimately determined it's not exactly broke out. So you get all of that at a cost of $2,789 per officer per year. Thanks, Commander.
Chief, the question was posed by me in the message board. It was actually for all 3 of the tools mentioned. So are we going to get a cost breakdown of the remaining 2?
I think you already did. I think Carrie Fontenot provided that. If not, I have it. Chief, do you know?
Councilmember, I believe that information was provided on the message board. And if you don't have it, I do have the information. We can upload that information.
Well, just while everybody's watching, can we pull it up and provide that? I can pull it up here if I need to.
Bob, Brandon, y'all do your magic real quick and look.
This is going to take a bit. Let's proceed with the presentation, and then
Okay.
we'll look back.
I have a quick question. When you say May, does that mean that our officers were given the TASER 10 in May of last year, or?
That is when the first officers would have received it, because along with whenever you roll out a new tool, there must be training that is done in conjunction with that new tool. So May is when it started to train 126 sworn. I don't know if I got my number there right, but over 100 sworn. You can't do that in one day, so it is a months-long rollout that is encompassed also in training. But the first time that we did that rollout, the first officers to get it were in May of '24.
Okay, so during the tragic killing of Malachi Williams in April, I think the officer attempted to use a TASER twice, both of which failed.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess this TASER offers a maximum range of 45 feet and improved accuracy. That model wasn't available during that incident?
No, ma'am, unfortunately, it wasn't.
Okay, but now everybody has it?
Now, yes, ma'am, we have received all of them. Everyone has been trained, and that has been rolled out.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Councilperson Rodriguez, I'm going to go back to you to answer your question
I
on
got
cost.
the figures
Okay.
pulled up, so thank you, Carrie, if you're watching.
Okay.
I know we're waiting on, I guess the TASER 10 is the one Chief just provided.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I get the breakdown of how you just provided that as far as per officer for however long? Same thing.
Thought you were looking at me, and I was like, no, I have no idea. I can't possibly provide, no.
Thank you.
So thank you for letting me off the hook for that one. The next tool that we got in 2024 was also in May is a Bowler Wrap, Bowler Wrap 150. The explanation is up there, but please forgive me, I am going to read it to you because I never thought we'd get to a point in law enforcement where we would have something like this. And now seeing how it's applied in the field, I'm like, it sounds silly on its face value, but it has value in the field.
What are we talking about?
The Bowler Wrap.
Oh, don't get me started on that. There's
Okay.
a lot of reviews that say that thing does not work even by officers, but
All electronic device that propels a Kevlar cord entangling individuals' arms or legs Is it 100%? Absolutely not. I think Councilwoman Garza also just spoke to that. However, I've also seen very good deployments of it. It is meant to entangle a person's arms or legs and stop that movement of whatever it is that is going on that has left that deployment. That is what it is meant to do. The other tool that we received in 2024 is 40 millimeter less lethal. I use that because that is the exact title of that item. This was meant to be deployed 2 per shift and to replace our beanbag shotguns. Beanbag shotguns are exactly what they sound like. They are shotguns that have been retrofitted to shoot a beanbag. However, the propensity for injury is higher than with a 40 millimeter less lethal. It has a projectile that is a dense foam round, and it has you can use it at far shorter distances and longer distances while minimizing injury as compared to that beanbag shotgun. So this was another tool to bring out that will minimize injury, but also gives us closer up distance or farther away, depending on the circumstances that are encountered. It is another tool in the tool bag.
Question.
Ma'am,
When we talk about close, how close are we talking about?
I think it does not recommend any closer than 10 feet. Please don't quote me on that, but I will get you
I saw 40, so maybe I'm,
the four.
I
I
saw
don't
40
believe
feet.
that is accurate, but I will find you the most appropriate answer, but I do not believe it is 40, but I'll leave room to be wrong.
okay. And what is the?
5 feet. 5 feet.
5 feet.
5 feet.
Our policy allows that to be deployed 5 feet away from an individual.
It's not just policy, but it is also that item of, again, that dense foam round of in the testing that that manufacturer provides, of that, yes, you can deploy it at this range up to as close as 5 feet, and still your risk of injury is less than a beanbag shotgun being deployed at the same distance.
Oh, yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
5 feet's a bit surprising to me. Do you also test all of these things on officers themselves?
The taser was tested on me, and I would not be volunteering to be tested on it again.
I mean, I think you know I did the same thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, if you're willing to do it, I'm willing to do it. I'll do
I'm
the
not
40
doing it
millimeter.
again. No, I'm not doing it
Okay.
again. I just asked because, I mean, 5 feet with a less lethal round.
Yes, ma'am.
I've seen those things up and close. Would the average officer want to be shot 5 feet away with that?
No, ma'am, I don't think officer or person, and again, so it is situationally and circumstantially dependent. It is a tool that we have to deploy, but it does not absolutely mean that we can. Just providing you with that range to be very clear that you can, but just because you can doesn't mean you should.
For
But
sure.
it does give officers those guardrails.
Okay. And you said that officers carry these at all time, all 3 of these?
Officers carry the taser and the bowler wrap, but there are only 2 40 millimeter launchers for each shift, 6 patrol shifts, so that's 12 of them. So you have 2 per shift, so on a shift you have roughly 8 officers, give or take. So you have 2 of them available, and that was the same way that we also did our beanbag shotguns. To outfit everyone with them is unnecessary, but to have that tool out in the field so those officers can respond to those calls when you find that that tool may be beneficial, then you've got 2 at least per shift.
Okay.
And we just got the last point there,
40 millimeter less lethal?
we just got those in July,
Yes, ma'am, that's when we started rolling out the training for those as well.
and we didn't have anything similar before.
We had the beanbag shotguns, which we still have, but this is a better alternative to that.
Right, I remember hearing a lot of discourse, like in the community, but also like online, whenever we talk about the tragic killing incident of Officer Lobo, and how there was a big conversation about like why didn't they use like other tools, and so I just was wondering if that was a thing also similar to, you know, not having the new tasers with Malachi, like if it was a timing thing.
I can't speak to the timing. I can tell you those tools were not available then, but also as you speak to Lobo, he's a friend, and one of my direct reports.
You're right.
I wish we would have had the opportunity to use this. I would have preferred that over the outcome that occurred.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. That was a question that I was asked to put forth.
Yep.
So I
Fair
appreciate
question.
it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, on to a bit of a, hopefully a happier topic. Is the last tool that we got internally to help us externally is voice. And I know, I'm not sure who asked it, but they said, hey, we watched the embedded video that's on here, and this looks like it's from the medical community. You're absolutely right. Voice started in the medical community. What is it? It is an app that is on a device that has certified translators. You pay for this service per the minute, depending on the language being sought. So every officer has this on a device that they carry with them. And all they have to do is tap on the app, it opens it, they insert their employee ID, so we have a way to track who's using it. And then they go down a menu, they select what language they need in that moment to communicate with whomever. And then within 30 to 90 seconds, you have a certified translator on video, on audio, who is ready to translate for you. So voice absolutely started in the medical community to allow better communication between doctors and nursing staff and other medical staff to get better care, better understanding. If you can't communicate, you are already behind the curve. How could you possibly come out successful? And so it started there, but then they realized that there are other fields that need this service. And as soon as we became aware of it, we jumped on it. To have someone who can speak Mandarin at 3 a.m. in the morning when you are trying to make a decision, when you are trying to gain as much evidence potentially on someone who's a suspect and who only communicates primarily through Mandarin, and you're making a decision to take away their freedom, to be able to communicate with them clearly, I mean, I don't know that I need to sell it much more than providing that example, because that was one of the examples that came to us that we used.
I have a question,
Yes, sir.
and I'm glad you're going to cover all those languages, but my question is sign language, how we addressing that now? Is it different or still the same?
No, actually, American
there.
Sign Language is the second item that we use this on, and so this
there
also
it is. I'm
covers.
sorry.
That's okay. It's a great question. I'm glad it's pointed out, but this also applies to American Sign Language. That's the video component. So now we can hold that video up rather than trying to do the pen and paper communication with someone who does use American Sign Language. This provides that where they can communicate with someone who is fluent in ASL and then provide us what information and be that translator for us. So it also covers American Sign Language.
Well, thank you. I just,
Yeah.
I don't know how I missed it, but I did.
That's okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What if you don't know what language it is?
Ooh, now that one is a tough one. That is where we say, hey Siri, I hope I just set off a bunch of people's cell phones. Or hey Google, and you start trying to work back. Now, here's the fortunate part. I mentioned earlier, and I'm just one of a few examples. I did a couple of study abroads, one of those was in China. Does not mean that I can fluently speak Mandarin anymore, far from it. But to be able to recognize of, hey, that is Cantonese versus Mandarin.
Right.
You have different officers who represent the same public that can go, hey, do you have any experience in this? Can you determine, can you even figure out what language you're speaking? You may not be able to speak it, but can you help us? So you have not only that, but then you also have the, hey Siri, what can Siri tell us? And hey, what do you know? Leveraging technology, it's not how I thought we'd use it, but it's worked for us thus far.
Okay, I thought maybe voice might have something that if the person spoke, that they would, that the voice app would figure out at least close to what language, no?
No,
Okay.
ma'am, they ask us for what language do you need? So if we can
Okay.
get them to that point, then they're willing to help us, but unfortunately, they don't have that. But I could ask.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
So, in our 7 months, we used it 152 times. You can see the total minutes, but it has been quite wonderful to have this as an available option. So that gives you a small glimpse inward of SMPD in 2024. Now to keep that ball rolling on how we are going to maintain our endeavor to improve internally, Assistant Chief Bob Collette on the accreditation process.
Thank you, Commander Williams. She said, my name is Bob Klett. I'm one of your assistant chiefs over administration. I came here to go to school in 1986 and almost immediately got involved in the local fire department. So I've lived here, involved in public safety my whole entire time. Joined the department 35 years ago, serving since. raised my family here. I brought my kid up to the schools here, so certainly loving San Marcos and invested in the schools here and the community here. So I'm here to talk today about accreditation and where we're at. And Texas Police Chiefs Association provides accreditation to Texas law enforcement agencies who meet best practices in law enforcement management and operations. These best practices are carefully developed by Texas law enforcement professionals to assist agencies in the efficient and effective delivery of service, the reduction of risk, and the protection of individual rights. The Texas legislature demands a great deal of professional law enforcement in Texas, and the best practices were specifically designed to aid Texas agencies in meeting those demands and providing the best quality of service to the people of our state. For us, our journey began about a decade ago on becoming accredited. And it's one of those things that when you don't have a full-time person in charge of the program, it gets into the backseat of several other things, no matter how important it is. So I really want to credit Chief Standards with coming here and helping us moving off center. You can see now that this is still a relatively exclusive program with only 8% of Texas agencies that are currently accredited at the time through the program. There's 2,792 Texas agencies, and only 218 of them are accredited. We're one of the 52 working towards accreditation by the TCPA, or the Texas Police Chiefs Association. The program philosophy is kind of basic. They want to make the requirements achievable for agencies to comply. They want to assist agencies in compliance, and they provide resources for us, such as sample policy manuals and so forth, that we can review. And so what the process has kind of looked like over the years is we've had this sample policy manual. We look at that, and we look at the things in those policy manuals that make sense for San Marcos, we keep, and those things that don't really make sense for San Marcos, we can remove. As we transition from older legacy policy manuals to the new accredited policies, I've been very happy to see that a lot of our
I was afraid of that.
It's in Kyle.
been very happy to say that a lot of our policies were already reasonable and made a lot of sense, and we haven't had to change a terrible amount of the policies to match. But we have reviewed every single one of our policies and adapted them. Some of the policies have been adapted multiple times as things have changed. So as part of the process, when we look at our policies, we have to prove compliance with 173 best practices for Texas law enforcement, or what we call standards. These best practices are a compilation of things which address the 12 critical areas where law enforcement typically gets sued. And these 12 critical issues are up on your screen. A lot of them make sense as you see them. Use of force, how we drive, search and seizure, care and custody, restraint of prisoners, off-duty conduct, the list goes on there. But those are the kind of things that guide us and guide the recognition program, the accreditation program, on what that looks like. So for all these 173 best practices, they give us standards that we have to look at. They give us guidance on our policies. Here's a sample best practice standard, 2.01 on bias-based profiling. And what you see on your screen, let me change the slide here. What you see on the screen here is the language that talks about what the standard is. That we have to comply with current laws on reporting bias-based profiling, that we train our personnel in the prohibition of bias-based policing or profiling. Says that if the agency uses in-car cameras or body cameras, the directive shall require supervisory review of at least 3 random videos, at least every 6 months per officer. So we look at a standard like this, and there's additional discussion. So some of the additional discussion, I'll kind of read verbatim here. Prohibition of a bias-based profiling, however, is broader than the state-required racial profiling prohibition. The agency's written directive should meet or exceed state law requirements for prohibition of racial profiling, but must also prohibit any profiling based on ethnic background, gender, sexual orientation, religion, economic status, age, cultural group, or any other identifiable group. Agencies need to ensure their policies include this expanded definition. Those kind of things make really good sense and are really good guidance to agencies that even if they have policies like this, they may not have fully comprehended what all the policies should include. So that's the benefit of having these kind of standards. And even though the standard here is reviewing the videos at least every 6 months, our process is we're more demanding than that. We review quarterly. And then Commander Williams also mentioned about the event review board. So these things are being reviewed much more often than even what the standards would call for. One of the next standards, as an example, is vehicle pursuits. We talked a little bit about what our stats were over the last couple of years on pursuits. Again, the standard talks about that an agency has to have a policy. Written directives include the criteria for starting a pursuit, how officers conduct that pursuit, supervisors' responsibilities during pursuit, and the criteria for terminating a pursuit. This standard has remained unchanged for years, but our policy has adapted constantly. We've had many, many different iterations of policy, as this is one of the policies that we look at often to tweak and have the best kind of policy we can for our community. One of the last samples that I will provide for you is inventory of property and evidence. This talks about how we have to review and account for every piece of evidence in our possession. Right now, that's about 31,000 pieces of evidence that we maintain at the San Marcos Police Department. And so, as you can imagine, how we handle our evidence is critical to our reputation of our department. If we're losing evidence, if we're mishandling it, if we can't find it, if we don't know the chain of custody from when it was taken into custody, through our department, to the labs, back to our department, to the courts, these things all help to not serve our victims of crime, when sometimes this evidence is the only thing that will be the proof to a conviction for somebody, or proof of an innocence to a person that is charged. So what are some of the benefits of accreditation? We've talked about some of the standards, but it provides a benchmark for professional Texas law enforcement and facilitates our pursuit of excellence, professional excellence in our community. It assures you all, the community, of high-quality service from their police agency. It ensures well-developed policies and procedures that meet or exceed the best practices for the state of Texas law enforcement, and that employees are provided clear and appropriate guidance. Because the department provides proper guidance with appropriate policies, officers are less likely to act in a manner that will result in legal action. If legal action is encountered, the department can easily show that it did act with due diligence in the development of appropriate policy and training, thereby strengthening the department's defense against complaints and lawsuits. It ensures the agency has policies and procedures in place to comply with all state laws regarding law enforcement. It ensures that we have appropriate and required training provided to officers and employees. Requires preparedness program to ensure that the agency is prepared for natural and man-made disasters. It enhances employees' pride in their agency and improves relationship with the community. And it enhances recruitment and retention of qualified staff. So again, we're looking at those things that most likely get law enforcement agencies into trouble and where we fall short of providing service to our community members, and helps us address those items. So becoming accredited, as I said, this has been a long process for our department. But basically, an agency that has been awarded accredited status has undertaken a careful internal review of its policies, its procedures, the equipment, facilities, and our operations. The agency then submits proof of their compliance with the standards to independent assessors. In our case, that was over 630 items. This is where we are right now. Last week, we submitted our last 4 standards, and they were approved. So now the next part of the process is that a team of assessors is sent to the agency to review our operations and our facilities, to interview department staff in what is typically a 2 or 3 day period. For us, I am very excited to announce that we learned this morning that our on-site visit from the team will be April 22nd through the 24th of this year. Once that team comes on site and they review everything, a final report outlining the findings is sent to the accreditation committee, and that committee will then vote on the accredited status for the department. Once we become accredited, staying accredited is the next step. So accredited status is awarded for a 4-year period. During that 4-year period, the agency must submit annual reports and show continuing compliance with several performance-related standards. These are reviewed and they are received and compliance is verified. During the last year of the period, the agency must prepare updated documentation on all best practices, and another on-site review is conducted. The accreditation must then again vote to accredit the agency. Once an agency reaches accredited status, continued participation is the goal here, right? So it's not a one and done kind of thing, or, hey, San Marcos has checked off the box, I'm becoming accredited. We work hard to maintain that accreditation status. It provides, again, the citizens confidence that we're constantly reviewing policies, that those policies are being reviewed by independent trained assessors. It makes sure that we're paying attention to new current laws and that we're staying abreast of new standards that will come about from the Texas Police Chiefs Association. So just excited to tell you that this has been a lot of hard work. It's not just myself, but all the supervisors, the employees of the department have reviewed policy. They give feedback. We get community feedback on policies, and we work very hard to keep all those updated and current for San Marcos. So that is the current status of our accredited program. Thank you, Council. I appreciate y'all.
Any questions on the accreditation or other items covered by Assistant Chief Klett?
All my questions were from the other parts. I thought we were gonna do questions at the end, my bad.
Okay. Well, we're going to a new section.
Okay.
I didn't think the same though, too.
Yeah, so,
Oh, well, if you have them for later, that's okay too.
yeah, I'll do them a little later. yeah.
Okay.
Maybe they'll be answered in the next.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Audrey Verver. I've been with the San Marcos Police Department for a little over 21 years now. For the first 15 years of my career with San Marcos, I spent in the dispatch center as a dispatcher, call taker, answering calls and sending first responders. For the last 6 years, I've been the records and communication manager, and I'm still learning constantly. Outside of that, I've lived in the San Marcos area for a little over 25 years, and all of my children have either attended or currently attend San Marcos schools. So I'm very invested in what goes on in the city and our community. I want to share some numbers with you. In 2024, San Marcos 911 Center processed a total of 121,909 calls. What that means is that the call center received 911 or non-emergency calls, as well as calling out on behalf of the community members. If there's something that they needed and it was our place to make that phone call, we made those outbound calls as well. During the busiest hour on the busiest day, the call center received an average of 3 calls per minute. Sometimes less, and at times there's often more calls that come in within a minute. And it's just not always that busy, but sometimes it's far more busier than that. In 2024, we answered 97% of our calls within 10 seconds. We strive to answer all calls, whether it's 911 or non-emergency, within the first 1 to 2 rings. But that doesn't always mean that we answered it quickly, it's processed quickly. Unlike larger agencies such as Austin, we typically have 1 to 2 call takers on at any given time for the entire city, including citizens, commuters, anybody that's in the community, only 1 to 2 people answering all calls. Places like Austin will have their call centers divided up. So 911, 311, as well as fire and EMS calls, those go to different call centers. But within San Marcos, everything within the city jurisdiction, it's 1 to 2 call takers at any given time. So I want to share our call processing times. In 2022, specifically 2022, our call processing time was about 178 seconds or 3 minutes. In 2024, it went down to 164 seconds or about 2.5 minutes. Call processing includes the queue time when you actually dial the number, from the time it takes it to ring, we answer and possibly put you on hold, and then the time to actually process the call. I specifically pulled 2022, it wasn't an error, but because in 2022, with that call processing time, I carried an average of 9 vacancies throughout the year within my comm center, so call takers and dispatchers. Whereas in 2024, my average vacancy was about 4. So I skipped 23 because it was about in the middle. Real quick, it's not in the presentation, but I currently have 5 vacancies, and I have 5 candidates that are somewhere in the process of being hired for this month, and then another one coming in May. So I'm hopeful we'll be fully staffed. Fully staffed doesn't mean fully trained. You're not able to do all the job duties until you're fully trained. So previously, I talked about actual phone calls that came into the call center, and now I want to share calls for service. Call for service is a digital record that we create within our CAD system, computer-aided dispatching system, and we typically will collect the caller's name, address, phone number, and call details. Those records can be sent out to first responders as they're en route to an incident. And for the 121,000 calls that we took, we only created 75,000 calls. Not every call that comes into the call center is going to need a call for service. For example, if we have a major accident on 35, we have a structure fire, or maybe a large fight in a crowded bar, we're going to receive multiple phone calls, but we're only going to create 1 call for service for that incident. So that's why you're going to see that big difference between the numbers. Out of the 75,000 calls for service that were created last year on behalf of SMPD, Fire Department, EMS, as well as the Marshal's Office, the majority of those were police-related calls. That's typical. Usually fire and EMS is less than 20% of our calls, less than 30% of the calls. Most of it is typically police-related. So compared to 2023, we had 8% more calls for service that were created. So we saw an increase about 4,000 more calls for service that were created last year. Some of the top calls that were created for police included traffic accidents, hazards, and traffic complaints, then disturbances, all types of disturbances, and noise call, followed by business alarms, suspicious related calls, and then thefts. Our top fire-related calls were alarms, service calls, citizen assist, gas leaks or odors, structure fires, and electrical hazards. And then EMS, our top call types were falls, sick persons, breathing problems, unconscious or fainting, and chest pains. So as I was talking about the time to process a call, there are some barriers that we run into that will delay how fast we're able to process a call. In our 911 center, we use CERICOM. It's our language line. It's provided to us through CAPCOG. And CAPCOG is Capital Area Council of Governments. They oversee CAECD, which is our Emergency Communications District. CAECD is who disperses 911 funds to the different 911 centers that are all falling within their district. That covers our 911 systems, maintenance, technology, as well as training. So we used CERICOM last year within the comm center to speak to anybody who didn't speak English as their first language. 891 calls were used through CERICOM, totaling in 6,432 minutes. The majority of those were Spanish-speaking callers. Did you have a question?
I do have a question for this, and I had asked it when we did like the tour. I think there was like a thing in the PD, but I didn't get an answer, and I said I would follow up, and I didn't, so I apologize. But, well, first, I really appreciate the effort to bridge the language barriers through services like this. It sounds really great on paper, but after listening to the 911 audio from the Malachi Williams case, I was like kind of taken aback by how there was like little reassurance and like no transition phrase to indicate to the caller that help was coming. It was just very very detached handoff. As someone who listens to like a lot of 911 calls, because I'm a true crime girly, I'm sorry. Kyle needs to get it together. I just know that like in high stake emergencies, the way an operator engages can be life or death. So I'm just wondering like, how do we make it more efficient or inclusive instead of disorienting? If we know that the majority of the calls are in Spanish, like I feel like it would make sense to have like a Spanish script that says, hey, by the way, like, we're connecting you with somebody who speaks in Spanish, like saying that in Spanish, but that didn't happen. So I was just taken aback by that.
That's great feedback and something I can definitely take back, and we can at least implement that portion. I will say that if I had more call takers in the center that were Spanish speaking, I think we wouldn't even have to use language line. But I can't
Right.
hire based on Spanish speaking, and we also don't compensate for Spanish speaking right now within our comm center.
Right.
But it would definitely entice more. If ever I have a call taker that's on duty that speaks Spanish, we attempt to pass it off to them. Hey, can you take my phone call? I'll take your radios, just so that we're not having to reach out to a third party. I will say that this service that we have access to, it's been a great resource. We do run into situations where the translation isn't great. When we have that happen, we pull the recording, we send it back to Capcog, they reach out to the vendor, and they address it. That happened
Right.
recently.
I think once it was connected, it was great, but I just think of, if it was like an immediate, like, you know,
Just a short
situation
script.
where, and I have heard other phone calls and I've heard really good feedback from other individuals that call and, you know, the operator is very affirming, like calming them down, making sure to get the details. So I think that's why I was just taken aback by that. Like if we are, I'm assuming paying for this service, to make best use of it, like a simple transition phrase to make sure that the caller
They know
knows-
help is coming.
Yeah,
Okay.
and instead of it sounding like they're calling, you know, the customer service line at Costco with like weird music, right?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
No, that's great feedback. Thank you for sharing that.
Ms. Ferber, I have another question. You've mentioned a couple times needing more personnel. Has this been a theme for years now, or is this?
This is everywhere across the United States. Keeping a 911 center fully staffed is almost impossible. If you were to pull 100 PSAPs right now and ask for staffing, I would be shocked if 10 of them said they're fully staffed. So
Is it
it's not isolated to us.
Is it a pay? Is it a vicarious trauma issue? Is it the latter?
Yeah, both
Okay.
combined. It's shift work, that's tough, accompanied with pay. How PSAP centers are ran, do they have training, do they have resources? I mean, we are at a point here in our agency that we are taking into consideration mental health for our telecommunicators. And I
Absolutely.
strongly believe that that's why our retention has improved in the last 5 years. Because we're just kind of left behind. Do the job, suck it up. But we're at a better place than we were 5-10 years ago easily.
Quick question, Texas State, do we respond to their 911s as well?
No.
Or they have their own? How
They
do you
have their
separate
own
the difference?
911. Cell phone towers predominantly, which are usually pretty accurate. So depending on where you're at, you make the call, it goes to the tower, and then it'll send it to the appropriate agency. It happens on rare occasion that one PSAP will get a call that needs to be transferred. That happens. Texas State is a full 911 center, so they do receive their calls, they dispatch their units. However, we dispatch fire and police, or fire and EMS. If they need an ambulance or a fire truck, if we don't see the call, because we share a system, they'll call us quickly and say, I need an ambulance, and all of the notes are already there. It's less time to process those calls.
Thank you.
What's
And
that?
go- Sorry. Going back to the staffing issue. In previous budgets, have y'all expressed this before?
Almost every year. And
And-
since Chief's gotten here, he's been a big advocate for us to get more positions, better pay, support from council. We're just at a better place where we're able to offer more. So this person that's sitting in there, it's a livable wage. You're able to pay bills and live in this area, and it wasn't that way years ago.
And Ms. Ferber, talk a little bit about some of the things that we did do within the last 12, 14 months that we were able to do in terms of addressing compensation, shift differential. So we were really in a much more dire situation than I would say where we are today, in the sense that we were able to address some of those things. And so we did hit, so if you want to just kind of share a little bit about
Yes,
that
definitely.
intentional work we worked on.
Pay increases, definitely that helps. That's not an end-all, fix-all, but we have to address folks working at night. You're missing out on a lot of time with your family, so the city offered shift differential. Just like law enforcement officers, nursing, other first responder agencies, if you're working night shift, there's additional compensation. That helped. We also offered a hiring incentive. If you came to us with a license, meaning that you need less training for me to release you onto the floor and be able to fully do your job, then you got a higher hiring incentive. I think that's made a huge difference because they're able to move to this area and at least get situated. What's also helped is keeping folks, having more folks, that means less overtime. We were at a point that we were having to mandate every pay period. We were bringing in firefighters to just do a piece of the job because they can't do the whole job. And we were in a bad situation, like Ms. Reyes said. But because I don't have that anymore, I have staff coming to me going, can I have some overtime? Can I have some overtime? And that's a good place to be in. Most other agencies, APD, for example, are mandating an employee to come in and work one shift and then stay an entire second shift because they don't have staffing. When they have that downtime to recuperate, to rest, spend time with their families, it's easier to come back to work and do it all over again.
And of your staff that you have now, just a guess, how many of them are from San Marcos?
I would probably say less than 10 from this area. We've pulled a lot from out of state. Out of the 5 that I talked about earlier that are coming this month in May, 2 are from Colorado. 1 is from San Antonio. She's licensed. I have another one coming from Bastrop and another one coming from Pflugerville that turned down multiple opportunities there because he wants to come to San Marcos.
And is it because we're putting our hiring efforts towards people outside of this area, or is it just people here, we're not getting any bites?
No, I don't feel like we're advertising externally to pull in those candidates. I ask that question specifically with every single candidate that comes in. And what I've gotten from our last 10 hires is I've heard great things about San Marcos. I've heard great things about your agency. Some of the folks that I've pulled from Comal County, New Braunfels, I'm not afraid to say yes, I'll pull them in when I can get them. They say, as a dispatcher from those agencies, I've interacted with your dispatchers, and they've been professional, they've been courteous. So that made me want to come move and join your agency because your retention's higher, your pay is higher, and I've interacted with you personally, and it's been a better experience.
And living here, and like you said, when you first started, having kids go through the school system and all of those things, do you think it makes your ability to serve our people better, to really have a relationship with this community in the way that you do?
I think so. I think I have a good understanding of what they're experiencing. When my kids come home and tell me what they're experiencing and participating in community events, shopping here, driving here every single day, like I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on.
Okay.
Quick question, these employees that we're talking about, are they considered our employees or they're under the chief of police's?
My telecommunicators?
Right.
Yeah, that we fall city employees within the police department.
Okay, then we're the one that makes up the raises and everything else. Okay. Thank you.
When council, like, for example, when you do non-civil service increases, that captures your civilian employees in the police department, that is your telecommunicators and such. It's not the uniformed police and fire that are part of the civil service.
Thank you.
That was really helpful information. When we think about what programs to kind of advocate for or support when it comes to like workforce training, if you're saying that these type of operators, like it's a national issue, I think that, yeah, that's something to like make note of, that how can we work with outside agencies to help individuals, especially local individuals, like get their telecommunicator license and other forms of training.
So unlike a police officer's license that you can put yourself through the academy, that's not available in Texas right now. You have to be sent by another agency. We're constantly changing how we're doing training, and we're about to approach that differently with our next batch and essentially get them licensed before they go to on-the-floor training. So they're going to receive a lot of basics before they start their on-the-floor answering calls and dispatching.
So to get their foot in the door for this career, they have to be referred by the,
No.
wait, I'm confused.
High school diploma or GED.
Okay.
And clear background check. Go through the process. One of my new applicants has very little work experience, but he passed the online testing, passed the background check, and has a high school diploma or equivalent. We're going to send him to that training. You don't have to have it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wait, where's the training?
So we have the option of using TEKS and online training, or we can send them to another agency that's fully hosting. CapCog is one that we usually depend on. This time around, we're gonna focus on TEKS, and so we're gonna have them 4 hours of classroom with TEKS, and then we're gonna mix in policy, procedures, and classroom training with our in-house instructors. We're hoping if we approach it this way, that we can get a lot of the classroom training out of the way, so we're not interrupting on the floor training. We think that's slowing down and holding back on retention, so we're trying to adapt each time we have a new batch of candidates come through.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
fascinating.
And just one last question. So let's say one of your call takers just gets a pretty traumatic call, like you can tell it's a lot for them. And I imagine there's a supervisor
Every
walking-
shift.
Okay. So what happens, like if I need to take a break, there's only 2 of us. I just need a moment to reset, recharge. What typically happens in a instance like that?
So minimum staffing is 4, and 2 of those will be call takers. Excuse me. If one of those call takers takes a traumatic call, which happens almost daily, every couple of days, typically the supervisor will say, hey, take a minute, and one of them will go step off the floor. That means there's 1 call taker left for the remaining of the calls that come in while they're out of the office. If it's ever enough that we need to send them home, which is okay, it's perfectly acceptable, we'll reach out to another supervisor, the operations manager, or we'll send out a page and say, hey, we need somebody to come in. We can't leave fire radios, police radios, or phones unattended. It's not an option. So as dispatchers, we prepare them for those calls as best we can, but sometimes you need to hold out for 20 minutes, 30 minutes until I can get somebody else in there if I don't have that second call taker on the floor.
That's good to hear.
And I will also want to just recognize and commend is that if you've been on a police department tour, you might have seen they even have some space available that really does provide kind of that relaxation, mental health, just being able to take that minute that they may need if there is somebody that needs those resources during their shift.
Good, okay, let's get back to some numbers, because we all love those. So in talking about processing calls and some of the barriers that we run into, Language Line is a great resource for us, but we're finding that it takes an average of 7 minutes to process a Language Line call. Half of that time is spent connecting to Language Line, determining the proper language, asking questions, and then hoping that they provide a clear translation back to us. The next call type that sometimes can take an extended period of time are the critical medical calls. Those, on average, are 5 or more minutes that will be on those calls. Usually, we're trying to calm the callers, triage patients, and then providing medical guidance before responders get there. That typically includes CPR or bleeding control if they need it. Next are disturbances, and those on average 5 to 10 minutes. We're usually, because we stay on the line with some of these calls, we don't just take information and disconnect. We're calming the callers. We're trying to find out what's going on. Most importantly, in those disturbances, we're getting them to safety, because you may not think I need to remove myself from the situation. Then we provide any pre-arrival instructions if necessary. And then lastly are our mental health calls. These can take anywhere from 10 to 25 minutes. Just trying to gather basic information, provide safety instructions if necessary, connecting them to resources if we can. But we're finding that the majority of our mental health calls take an extended period of time because these callers, whether it's first party, second party, they don't know what they need. They don't know what they want. I just need help. I just need to talk to somebody. And a lot of times they're not forthcoming. They're scared to share what's going on because they don't know what the outcome's gonna be or what resources they can get from calling us. So we spend a lot of time just trying to get some information out so we can determine the best resource. So last year, we partnered with Avail Solutions. It's a third-party provider under contract with Hill Country Mental Health, our local mental health authority. Think of Avail Solutions like they mentioned earlier, 988, the international or national crisis hotline. The difference with Avail and just 988 is they have knowledge and resources or local resources for our citizens. So if you're here and we connect you to Avail, they're gonna have firsthand knowledge of local resources that they can connect you to. How that works is the call comes into the comm center, we triage it, we get basic information, and then we determine, yes, this is one that we can send to Avail. We send it to Avail, we give them a summary of what's going on, and then they attempt to provide resources or assistance, or if it's just, I need somebody to talk to, they stay on the line with them for as long as needed, and then that frees up my call taker. If Avail determines there is an immediate need for response, fire, police, or EMS, they transfer the call back to us. And then because we already have the initial information, we're able to send first responders immediately without having to go through a whole lot of questions again. So we implemented this in November after months and months of policy planning and discussions. And we're just now getting enough data that we can analyze it and getting feedback from staff. What we're finding is the majority of these calls are coming back to us. Avail, that mental health professional, is interacting with this person, and then based on their judgment, they're saying, nope, they need a response now. We're not gonna just quit using this service. We're gonna continue to evaluate these calls. We've sent some of these calls back to Avail and said, hey, listen to this. Could this have been handled differently? Did it have to come to us? We wanna make sure those resources are given to them as a first stop if ever possible. But just to recap, our phone calls from last year have decreased, but the number of calls for service have increased. Our staffing numbers, more specifically those that have actually completed training, have gone up, and then our call processing times have gone down. So just as we implemented Avail, we're constantly looking for ways to change training, improve retention, and just improve our procedures.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I won't take up too much of your time because you've had a lot of information come at you already. Like I mentioned earlier, my name is Joseph Osborne. I actually grew up in San Marcos. I went to San Marcos High School, graduated from there. I also got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice with a psychology minor from Texas State University. And I've been with San Marcos Police Department since October 2013. I graduated the academy from Hays County Sheriff's Office in June 2014, and I worked night shift patrol, which has been the common theme amongst all of us. We worked night shift patrol until I transferred to the mental health unit in January of 2023. During that time, I was a field training officer. I was promoted to corporal. I hold a Master Peace Officer license, and I'm certified as a mental health officer, de-escalation and crisis intervention training. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of a breakdown about our mental health unit. You've heard a lot about it today, especially during the presentation earlier. It was established in 2008 with a single mental health officer. Since then, it's been expanded to include myself and two full-time mental health officers, each with their Master Peace Officer license, mental health officer certification, and over 20 years of law enforcement experience each. We also have Therapy Canine Sophie, who's deployed to assist when scenes are safe and helps people deal with traumatic situations by providing a calming presence. A great example of what the Therapy Canine can do is frequently we'll have child victims who are called to testify in court about the crimes that were committed against them, and Sophie will just sit with them and provide that calming presence while they're waiting to go in and testify, and it really, really helps them. In 2023, the unit added a qualified mental health professional who has her master's in social work and has experience working in mobile crisis outreach and various homeless shelters. She's what's referred to as a co-responder. She responds with our officers in the field to the calls for service. And then in 2024, the unit added 2 homeless outreach officers, each with their mental health officer certification and more than 5 years of law enforcement experience each. The mental health unit does try to focus heavily on case management, like Chief Sandridge gave the example of earlier. When we're not assigned to calls for service, we make it a point to proactively follow up with individuals who've been in crisis and see how best to assist them. Like the chief mentioned, it's different for each person, but sometimes it includes helping them access a particular mental health resource. A lot of times we're able to do that through our partnership with the local mental health authority that's been mentioned a few times, Hill Country, and their local clinic in San Marcos. Sometimes that's substance abuse resources, one of those being Evoke Wellness that you guys heard the presentation from earlier. Sometimes we'll transport people to their mental health appointments, just talk to them, check in and see how they're doing. We'll do emergency boxes from the Hayes County Food Bank that I believe the councilwoman mentioned earlier. So it's just dependent on the person. We want to meet them where they're at. There we go. Finally, to finish up, just going to talk about statistics. I know you guys have seen a lot of numbers throughout this presentation. But just to talk about the mental health calls for service. So calls for service, as Audrey was explaining, it's a call that comes into our department and it's processed through and determined, okay, yes, an officer does need to handle it. So in 2023, we had a total of 2,290 mental health calls. That number stayed almost the same. It went down just a little bit in 2024 to 2,281. As far as those calls, the number that resulted in emergency detentions in 2023 was only 259, so only 11% of those calls. And in 2024, it was only 290, only 13%. So we really try and strive to focus on assisting people without having to go the emergency detention route. We want to avoid that if we can, because we want it to be on their terms, and we want it to be a team effort, essentially.
Mr. Osborne, real quick, when we
Yes.
say emergency detention, what are we talking about?
So an emergency detention is something that Texas peace officers have to do sometimes whenever we've determined that someone is an imminent risk of serious harm or death to themselves or others. And in those cases, we have the authority as law enforcement to detain them and take them for a mental health evaluation, even if they don't want to. And what I explained in the previous bulletin section is we know that that's an option, but we try to avoid it at all costs because we want it to be on the person's terms and basically a team effort rather than us deciding for them.
For sure. And where are we detaining them at during this?
So
this
it depends. They're always going to be taken for a mental health evaluation, but for each person, it's dependent on the circumstances because they may be intoxicated or under the influence of drugs, or they may be injured. In those cases, they'll have to be taken to an emergency room where they receive treatment for the medical aspect, and then once they have either become clean and sober from their alcohol or drug intoxication, or their wounds are medically treated, then they speak with the mental health professional who then decides, do they need to go to an inpatient facility or what have you. If we don't have any of those needs, we try to take them directly to an inpatient facility.
Okay, so
That
not
way
the,
they
not the
don't-
jail is.
No,
okay.
that's not an appropriate place. It would be a hospital of some sort. It just depends on what their needs are, if it needs to be a medical hospital first.
Okay.
So I brought up earlier that we added a qualified mental health professional in 2023. She responded with us to 342 calls in 2023, and she didn't start until the end of March that year. In 2024, she responded to 458 calls with us. And as far as the total number of mental health calls in 2023, an actual officer from the mental health unit responded to 1,296, which is 57%. That's a reminder, there's only 3 of us on the mental health unit. And in 2024, an officer from the mental health unit responded to 1,294, or 57% of those calls. So you heard me mention earlier when I introduced myself that I have a mental health officer certification. That's it's an important certification because it provides a lot of additional training in dealing with mental health calls. So just because an officer's not on the mental health unit doesn't mean they don't have that certification. In fact, we have a lot of officers in our department that do already have the mental health officer certification. So that 57% that you see up there, that just means they were from the mental health unit, not that they didn't already also have the mental health certification. And as Chief Winkenwerder will explain in his presentation, there's additional officers in the department that have that certification. And the plan for San Marcos Police Department is to certify even more officers as mental health peace officers in this year, 2025. So I will, with that being said, pass it over to him so he can explain that to y'all.
And good afternoon. Brandon Winkenwerder, Assistant Chief of Police. My journey to the community started in 1993 when I attended then Southwest Texas State. I have a bachelor's in criminal justice with a minor in sociology. Started my career here in 1997. Thankful that I got this job opportunity instead of working for the Highway Patrol. I worked from patrol officer, patrol corporal to detective, promoted back in the late 2000s to sergeant, and I've been night sergeant, night commander, day commander, and now assistant chief. In assistant chief role, I have the operational services, which is the uniform patrol, the investigative units, the mental health and SRO units all underneath me. What I'm going to talk about here is our initiative this year to launch our mental health officer initiative. We are looking to certify an additional 57 officers as mental health officers to address our growing needs for the multifaceted responses that are needed for individuals in crisis. As you know, over the last several decades, mental health services have moved away from an inpatient model to more of the services-based model. Historically, law enforcement's really only had two options, and you heard one of those from Corporal Osborne, and that's your nonviolent, non-criminal, I should say nonviolent, non-criminal individuals who get placed under ED and go to a hospital. Those who may have committed criminal activity then would go through the criminal justice system and go through their pre-sentence investigation screenings and let the courts order what is needed based on those PSIs. As we continue to turn to law enforcement, our processes, we've realized, need to grow. Treatment needs to be better, support systems need to be better, and aftercare checkups, some of which we're trying to address. Our continuing reliance on law enforcement exposed some gaps, and in 2015, the state legislature recognized this, and they had passed a bill to create the Mental Health Officer Certification Program through the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. The program equips officers with additional tools they'll need to effectively respond to individuals in crisis, including training in mental health crisis intervention, de-escalation techniques, and legal considerations for handling such. The MHOs are specifically trained in intervention opportunities to connect individuals with resources, ensure they receive the appropriate care and services, and after services check-ins and checkups for preventing future episodes. We're looking to expand the range of available options with these officers. In the next slide, you can see where we currently have our MHOs. There are 8 in patrol, and that is divided amongst 6 patrol shifts. The mental health and hot officers, all of them, there's 5 there. All of the SROs, there's 5 there. The mental health and SRO Sergeant Scott, he's certified. There are 4 detectives. There's 1 in administration, and Officer Lee, Council Security, is another one. So our certification, we're going to certify 57 officers who are currently eligible. TCOL requires a minimum of 2 years law enforcement experience and then a number of classes. All of the training is in person. Most of it can be conducted in-house, as we have qualified instructors like Corporal Osborne. However, some will be outsourced. That's going to be due to the availability of classes and staffing levels related to making sure we maintain our shift coverages. The training unit has already gone in and reviewed who needs what. And at the bottom there, you see an example. For example, a 20-year officer needs different training than a 2-year officer. A 20-year officer will need a 40-hour crisis intervention class, an 8-hour de-escalation class, and a 24-hour MHO class. A new officer out of the academy needs less because the academy over the last several years has been expanded to include a lot of additional topics. So they would only need an 8-hour crisis intervention and a 24-hour update. With this initiative in place, we should have a total of 82 officers trained as certified mental health officers, and those guys will be, and girls will be in the frontline positions equipped to respond to the wider range of options that persons in crisis may need. And that wraps it. Right.
Good afternoon, Patty with San Marcos Police Department, Crime Analyst Supervisor. I've been in this position for approximately 1 year. However, my association with San Marcos started about 20 years ago. I was a student at Texas State University where I got my degree in criminal justice with a minor in forensic psychology and sociology. I went on and earned my master's in criminal justice as well, where I was a research assistant. And that is where I fell in love with being an analyst. I was exposed to different ways in which I can assist law enforcement, and I was always interested in understanding the criminal justice system and how I could assist, preferably behind a computer screen. So from my graduate degree, shortly afterwards, Hays County Sheriff's Office opened up a crime analyst position. And during that time there at Hays
County Sheriff's Office, I was assigned to CID. I was fortunate enough to work with state, local, even federal investigators on multiple cases. And then in 2015, San Marcos PD opened up the position for crime analyst. Now, honestly, I was a little concerned on applying for the crime analyst position here at San Marcos. The reason for that is because before at Hays County, I was one of the first analysts there, and it was a very difficult process. Crime analysts were not a very common resource provided to law enforcement. So my decision came down to two reasons. The first one was growth. Personally, I enjoy learning, and I want to continue growing in the field of analysis and growing that field here in this particular region. I'd like to think that I have hopefully contributed in a positive way. And then the second one is that San Marcos, this region where I've lived for quite some time, is the first place where I thought that I could actually see a future for myself. So I opted to stay in this particular area. I transferred to San Marcos PD. And here at San Marcos PD, I have had the opportunity to be assigned under CID for the majority of my career. However, because I was a lone analyst, my position and my responsibilities were fluctuated based upon the needs of the department. So as operation needs were identified, I had to push my efforts there, move away from investigation, strategic, et cetera. In 2023, we were fortunate enough to hire an administrative analyst, and then in 2024, we could hire an intelligence analyst, hence this position that we have here. So sorry for the long introduction, but let's get started on the context of crime. So this particular section right here, I want to break it down into 4 main sections. The first part is the workflow for crime data. The second part is the reporting systems that we typically use within law enforcement. The third part is the transitional years that we have to take into consideration as we analyze crime. And then finally, and hopefully this won't take too long, the updates on 2024 as a whole. So, as you can see up here, I want to provide a little bit of context of how data, specifically crime data, is processed through our system. We talked a little bit about calls for services, how they're processed, how long they take. We even talk about officers responding on scene. What we now talk about here is the police records in terms of crime reports. Our police records division reviews the accuracy of the case data. When they review the case data, they focus on the reports, the body cam, the evidence. Then the next step that they typically go through is sending their report to DPS, and the deadline is by the 10th of every single month. Within this flat file report, there is the previous month's data of what crime has occurred, as well as historical updates. Now, for those of you who can't see very well on the screen, we're talking about retroactive offense reports that were made, additional removal of involved parties, additional removal of charges, as well as arrests from the previous reported cases. So typically, that's not necessarily the most historical cases. It'll be the most recent cases that we'll see a lot of those updates. From there, the report is vetted out by DPS, and they review for errors. Now, this is an important part primarily because of the next slide that I'm going to be talking about. At the DPS level, we have them review our records as well as assist us in transferring our information from NIBRS to UCR data. From there, it then gets pushed up to the public-facing sites, and each of those public safety sites or open safety or open source sites, they get updated on a different regular basis. Some of them are quarterly, some of them are monthly, and some of them are yearly. So please keep that in mind as we source our information from the particular unit. Here is an example of one of the disclosures that are provided with any reports that are extracted out of DPS. Now, I know this is tedious and not a lot of people are particularly care for it, but this is hopefully to provide some context into why you may see some fluctuation in the numbers that we have across the board. So as you can see, there is that requirement by the 10th of the month. You have that the agencies can continue to update their incident data per their investigation findings. And probably the most important part right here is the item in red, which is due to the active nature of this data, the report may not match data retrieved from the system at a different time of inquiry. And that comes back to that previous slide where I was mentioning that any case investigations, we have to update that as they come in. Less than fun information right here, but we will move on. So this slide is broken down into two particular areas. The first area is the timeline for UCR, which is the Uniform Crime Reporting, which is one of the crime reporting methods, and then the National Incident-Based Reporting System. So as you can see, UCR was established in 1930. In 2016, the FBI actually requested or mandated that everybody moves to NIBRS. From that point in time, our records division was quite on top of it, and in October of 2018, they were already starting that mandatory transition to NIBRS. In 2021, of course, we went live across the board. Now, why are we talking about the two different reporting methods? This is because when we are talking about analysis over the past couple of years, we have been in the years of transition. So UCR only has the highest level of offense reported data, and NIBRS has a significantly more beneficial elements to the reporting system. So as I just mentioned, UCR, you only have the highest level of offense reported. On the National Incident-Based Reporting System, you can include up to 10 offenses. It also expands the offense category, and it captures computer and society crimes. Now, UCR and NIBRS, now that you guys have an understanding of the two different types of reporting systems, we have typically, over the past couple of years, used UCR numbers. Now, the reason why we've done that is specifically for operational and strategic analysis. And that ideal data set is between 2 to 5 years. So when we made that transition in 2018, and the full year being in 2019, we started the process that not necessarily everybody else had to start. As you guys saw on that previous page, it was mandated for February of 2021 for the rest of the nation to catch up on reporting the NIBRS style. So in order to provide consistent information, provide longitudinal information as it relates to UCR data, we have used that for the past couple of years, and we intend to use NIBRS beginning next year. Again, NIBRS is an ideal data set to use primarily because of the offenses that it collects, the relationship data that's available, and the property information that can be gleaned from there as well. So just a reminder on what UCR offenses are. There are typically only 10 reported Part 1 UCR offenses. What you'll see on the left side are the violent crimes, on the right side are the property crimes. Now, on the left side, we have murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and what you'll see is human trafficking, commercial sex acts, and human trafficking, involuntary servitude in a grayed out area. That's because that was added onto UCR at a later date and time. Property crime, on the other hand, includes theft, larceny, burglary, arson, as well as motor vehicle thefts. So as we move forward, keep in mind that we're looking at only UCR numbers and we're not looking at the NIBRS numbers. Okay, so earlier this year, we were informed that there was a discrepancy in some of our data, in some of our basic crime statistics specifically. So there was a percent change provided between 2012 and 2022 when we were doing a 10-year review of the violent crime within San Marcos. The bottom line is that there is a 169% change between 2012 and 22. Now, that does not provide contextual information on any of the years in between, but below is a snippet of all the information in which the violent offenses were captured at the time of the analysis. Underneath there, you can also see the percent change formula in case you're wondering, and that 277 is the raw difference between the two numbers in 2012 and 2022. As analysts, we typically try to ensure that we not only include the percent change, but we also include the raw numbers, as percent change can be misleading if you do not understand the raw numbers behind it. So, now, on to 2024. In 2023 to 2024, we saw a 3% decrease in reported offenses. The reductions were seen across most offenses with the exception of two specific areas. Rape, which increased by 8 offenses from 62 to 70, and motor vehicle theft, which increased by 58 offenses from 226 to 284. When you average this number across the year, there are approximately 8 criminal offenses reported each day. 5 of them are property, and 3 of them are person crimes. As it relates to property crime, between 23 and 2024, we didn't see a significant change at all. In fact, we only saw a difference of 1. However, when you look deeper into the numbers, what you'll see is that we have seen an increase in motor vehicle theft starting in 2021. In fact, we saw an increase in a lot of different areas that prompted our need to look further into different ways that we could address crime. So, 2022 to 2024, I'm going to take a quick pause here and I'm going to remind you guys why we're looking at 2022. 2022 is our biggest year of violent crime. And so when we are looking at that and our progression that we made forward, it's important for us to use that year as a beginner year, as well as it was the first year that we started implementing any sort of operational changes. So in 2022, there were 456 reported violent crimes. That's 5.7 violent crimes per 1,000 individuals. In 2023, we saw a decrease in 29%, with going down to 325. Finally, in 2024, we saw a 20% decrease to 261 with the 3.1 violent crimes per 1,000 individuals. So we are moving in the right direction as it relates to violent crime.
Ms. Hong?
Yes.
Real quick, can we go back to that last slide?
Yes.
So the 2022, is that accounting for the years prior to that?
No.
No? Okay.
Mm-mm. That is
20 DPS put out some numbers like that. That's why I asked, because
Okay.
COVID, obviously nobody was outside.
Yes.
And so they were using that as like a justification on why things spiked. So this is,
Only the year 2022 that were reported in this specific year.
okay.
Any other questions?
One question real quick.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to the rapes and they occurred at Texas State, do they get recorded as well or they don't?
So Texas State reports through their own system. We do not get those records.
Do we get that data though?
We technically share an RMS. As for how it's investigated, that does not touch us. No, sir.
Okay, but they're included in this report.
No, sir.
No.
They're not, there could be,
It could be more. Absolutely, yes, sir.
okay.
And just for the record, RMS is the records management system.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So previously, I talked about why 2022 was an important year and why that there were operational changes that were made. So we've talked a lot about numbers today, and yes, I'm an analyst, and yes, I think that they're important, but they only go so far. They don't provide context to how things are being done or why things are being done and how things are changing. So in 2022, we started changing how we operated within the department. We identified and knew that crime was a multifaceted issue, which requires a corresponding data-driven approach. So what that looks like is differential police response, police service specialists that focus on specific types of calls for services, lower calls for services, and then specific to the analyst unit are the data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. And that was our high-impact operations. So those are the items that we could address at a high-level scale that would hopefully have the most amount of impact numerically. After that, we focused on specialized units, and those specialized units included the Special Investigations Unit, the Special Victims Unit, that focus on child and elderly, the motor vehicle thefts, detective, as well as a behavioral threat assessment group. Now, I just want to take a quick moment to pause and talk about the Special Victims Unit mission statement.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I appreciate that you say that numbers are useful to a certain extent, but generally do not provide as much context into the what and the how. So, and I've talked about this a lot before, the 2022 spike in violent crime didn't happen in a vacuum. Many pandemic-related aid programs ended, inflation soared, and housing insecurity worsened. We've talked about this. Economic instability often correlates with increases in crime, violent crime, especially crimes of desperation. So given that, what role does the police department have in assessing how much of the 2022 spike was tied to these broader social and economic stressors?
So our main focus in that regard was just comparing it to the national average. So we just used it as a way to determine where we stand within the nation, within the state, and if we are on the same path. As it relates to the socioeconomic, that is not something that we have focused our efforts on at this point in time.
Is there any energy to kind of reflect on those factors, given that those folks that have the area of expertise in analyzing crime falls under the police department's kind of lane? I wonder how do we incorporate that aspect to be able to prioritize where our investments are as council, right? So we don't have data analysts. But for me, it would be helpful for somebody to do that unpacking, because that would help us really prioritize where to invest our other resources beyond policing. So housing assistance, mental health services, workforce programs, which are proven strategies for long-term public safety. So I think that's just like a question for us to ponder. Maybe we can tackle it in the Criminal Justice Reform Committee, how we can further unpack these numbers to, as Chief said, like our efforts with wraparound services to complement traditional public safety efforts. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And for whatever it's worth, our goal for 2025 is to implement risk terrain modeling, which is understanding the environment, how it plays into any sort of issues that law enforcement may see. It's a common use in the public health safety sector. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. So that is our goal. However, as you guys recall, we'd had new analysts in 2023 and 2024. We're still onboarding them, training them, and getting them to a place where we can implement this on a regular basis.
Oh, cool. That's helpful to know. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So going back to the Special Victims Unit, I really wanted to talk about the mission statement, which is to ensure that children, the elderly, the individuals with disabilities in our community flourish with a secure home environment. We aim to advocate for those who are unable or hesitant to speak up for themselves. Our commitment extends to providing families with resources, comprehensive services, and tools necessary for healing from the trauma caused by these crimes. We collaborate with the community stakeholders, provide safe haven for victims, and work to educate the community on prevention, identification, and reporting of such crimes. They also strive to empower the victims by providing support, strength, and courage that they need to begin the healing journey. The 3 detectives that are assigned to the Special Victims Unit work countless hours, and they are absolutely dedicated to every single one of their cases that they work, and it is evident in the prosecution that comes from them. Focusing on victims and continuing on them a little bit further, we have some exceptional victim service providers here at San Marcos Police Department. Their main goal is to assist with coordinating crime victim compensation benefits. That ranges from organizing resources, setting up medical exams, supporting them through the entire criminal justice process, whatever that may look like for them, as well as advocate for them in other areas. Again, we have had quite a bit of numbers thrown at you guys tonight. However, I wanted to provide you guys just how it looks. In 2024, there were 2,213 cases these 2 individuals worked. There were 1,708 new people that were served, and there were 137 continued contacts. This was with the 2 full-time employees, as well as 8 volunteers that they used to assist them in their efforts.
Before I advance that slide, I just want to brag real quick. Melissa Rodriguez is in attendance tonight. She's outside because of the overflow. She's the executive director of Hayes Caldwell Women's Center. We couldn't do it without Melissa and her team. I serve on her board of directors, which really means I just carry her water around. But huge shout out to HCWC. It is a really good partnership with them. So this is perhaps our citizens will not know this, but I think our council is aware of this, so I just want to speak to this issue. This is perhaps one of the more sensitive PowerPoint slides that we presented, but I need to explain why. The initial concept behind this was we were asking the question, how do our citizens feel about crime? And we wanted that conversation to be rooted in community and somehow relational and somehow reflective of the entire city, not from just one specific section or demographic. Introduced the idea that we use the Chiefs Advisory Panel. The Chiefs Advisory Panel is actually a very diverse group of community members. They all reside in San Marcos, and they reside all throughout San Marcos. So the concept was born that we would ask them to have a relational conversation with a neighbor and ask them questions about what do you fear as it relates to crime. That questionnaire was then sent to Maxfield Baker. Maxfield Baker took it and digitized it. I applaud him for doing that. And then it was shared with the San Marcos Civics Club. Ultimately, what has since transpired, and I'm going to fully own this, and I'm going to apologize to the mayor, to the council, and to Maxfield Baker personally, is when all of those results, and it was never intended to be a survey, but when all of those results were returned, many of those comments were germane to the question being asked. Some of those comments fell outside of the scope of the questions being asked. Consequently, staff did not include all comments on this slide. I regret that. I own that. It's my mistake. The buck stops with me. So the only reason I'm telling you that is because I'm really going to share with the entire community. We will provide the questions that were asked. We'll provide all of the responses provided by the members interviewed by the Chiefs Advisory Panel, and we will provide all of the results that were garnered by Maxfield Baker. I will work with Russell Wild. Russell is our communications, public safety communications specialist. I will work with him, and we'll try to get that done this week. So that information is forthcoming.
Question on that.
Yes, ma'am.
If the panel came up with this, what it's referred to on the slide is a survey, but you just said that it was never intended to be a survey. Were the people initially asked these questions pre-selected only by members of the panel? Like, why ask the question? Because aren't you trying to survey how someone feels?
Okay, I need to track your question. Are you asking me, did the Chiefs Advisory Panel?
You said
member?
verbatim,
Go ahead.
early, like moments ago, that it was never intended to be a survey. What was it intended to initially be?
It was intended to be a relational conversation with a neighbor, and it was supposed to be literally just a conversation. Hey, I'm served on the Chiefs Advisory Panel. That's what this means. I have a question for you. As it relates to crime and the fear of crime in San Marcos, are you comfortable answering a few questions?
And maybe how is that different than a survey?
Okay, fair question. In my mind, the concept behind a survey should have a scientific basis behind it.
Right.
It should be a very well crafted instrument, not or more similar to what Lawrence Early, Director of Communications, has done, I think, last year perhaps. That is, in my mind, what a survey is. The concept behind this was just to go out and relationally engage a neighbor and ask the questions.
Why that
And was the-
methodology
wait,
versus a
one-
survey?
One second. Was the intent for those responses collected, let's say hypothetically Maxfield never did anything in addition, was the intent to still bring those responses here and apply them to that graph right there?
No, the intent for the responses all along was for inclusion in the 2024 year-end review. So it's the annual report.
So how did this graphic get created if we didn't see what Maxfield gave us? If it wasn't the intent to share here?
Now, for sure, I fully understand the question. So at some point, staff had to sit down and say, okay, We have this very long, like 80-page end-of-year report. We have a public safety update that we need to provide to you all. What needs to be covered? There was consensus by most that this was probably germane to this discussion. So the decision was made to include this in this presentation. This morning, I learned the rest of the story. I learned that some of the survey results, because we'll call it what it is, it turned out to be a survey, were not included. So this is not a fully inclusive slide.
I guess it's just lost on me, the intent. I go back to it.
Yeah,
But
but it's.
and maybe members of the panel can help me better understand why, but
Yeah, and I'm going to suggest, since it is 5:34, that we ask for that to come back to us separately so that we can continue on, because we do have a 6 o'clock meeting.
I'm aware of the time. That's not lost on me. It's just,
But if there's not an instant response with the other data ready to go, we can't cover that now.
I mean, we were provided the data, and if it's appeases the audience, I can read some of those additional responses that we're discussing that aren't included on that graph.
Well, my commitment to all of our community is we're going to give you everything. We're going to give you what the members of the Chiefs Advisory Panel originally garnered, and we'll give you what Maxfield garnered through his Civics Club. We're going to give you everything.
And is that going to be done in a work session?
No, we're going to release it publicly.
We haven't talked about how to do that, so we can definitely talk about what that looks like in terms of doing it in a public setting. We have not talked about, we acknowledge that we need to provide all information, but we have not talked about in what way that we would do that. And we would want to make sure we not only provide to council, but also to the public.
I would hope so, especially when members of the public took the time to respond
Yes.
to that survey.
Yes.
Not trying to belabor the point, but when you see that slide, you know, it's providing one picture of the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's why
So
I'm stressing
We'll
that.
get that information, and we need to move on
But, I mean, I do have one question. So,
quickly.
I think whenever we revisit this, it'd be helpful to clarify why the survey design didn't include like behaviorally specific questions about community interactions with police. I appreciate the intent. I've brought up several times the National Crime Victimization Survey and how that might be an added perspective to kind of assess side by side the numbers. But yeah, my whole spiel isn't even about the Max panel situation. It's the design of the questions in general. Kind of
That's
weird.
where I am on
Yeah.
that. So that's a conversation for a future date.
Right. And Mayor, I just will finish with this. I'm not here to suggest that Maxfield did anything wrong. He took the questions being asked, he digitized it, and he shared it with the group. What we did wrong, what I'm apologizing for, is we did not put all results.
And we're going to get those results.
We're going to send it to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sergeant Scott.
Hello, my name is Tony Scott. I'm a sergeant with the San Marcos Police Department. I've been employed here since 2007. I spent 16 years on patrol, and then in January of 2024, I became the sergeant over the school resource officers and mental health unit. I have a master peace officer license. I am a mental health peace officer, and I have training in school-based law enforcement. I'm also an instructor for Alert Level 1, the Standard Response Protocol, and CPR. San Marcos CISD currently has 8,152 students enrolled this year. Of those students, approximately 2,500 go to San Marcos High School, 900 go to Goodnight Middle School, 900 go to Miller Middle School. There's approximately 120 students that go to Lamar Personalized Learning Center, which has the DAEP program and also a credit recovery program. And then we have seven elementary campuses with approximately 500 students on each campus, along with a pre-K campus with 500 students. The SRO Triad model was created by the National Association of School Resource Officers as an SRO isn't just a law enforcement officer, they're an educator and a mentor and an informal counselor who contributes to the overall support and safety of the school. The counselor mentor aspect of the triad does not mean that the SRO purports themselves to be a licensed professional counselor. They are a support figure who builds relationships with students and staff through daily interactions. These interfaces, or these face-to-face interactions build a sense of safety and can de-escalate potentially violent situations or unpredictable situations. The SRO is a trusted figure in the students and is not just an authority figure, but someone who genuinely cares about their well-being. They learn to identify when a student is facing personal challenges, allowing them to prevent the issue from escalating. Often students feel simply having someone who will listen makes that situation better. They also provide a place where they feel heard and can make significant differences on how they navigate their struggles, in addition to addressing many immediate concerns. An SRO can mentor students on conflict resolution, decision-making, and stress management. As a teacher and educator, the SRO gives lessons on various safety topics such as standard response protocol, teaching students how to recognize potential dangers and remain calm in emergencies. We also speak to groups such as the Parent-Teacher Association and Parents on Patrol. The SRO creates a bridge between law enforcement and the school community, ensuring that everyone from students to parents feel empowered with knowledge they need to keep the school environment safe and supported. As a law enforcement officer, SROs are trained to effectively respond to emergencies. They carry special equipment which enables them to manage high-risk situations. They conduct the SRP drills, which are essential in preparing students, faculty, and staff to react quickly and appropriately in the event of a real emergency. The SRO works in partnership with the school administration to investigate fights, assaults, and other situations on campus. Our goal is to avoid arrests and involvement with juvenile justice system where possible. Another role of an SRO is to act as a liaison between the police department and the school district. This connection helps with swift exchange of information related to student safety, community concerns, and law enforcement resources. I commonly joke with our director of safety at the school district that we have a 7:30 phone call, and then usually we have about a 5 o'clock phone call. Just 7:30 in the morning we talk various times throughout the day, and then at the end of the day we have another conversation, just kind of recap and prepare for the next day. That's almost a daily incident, so we always joke about how much we communicate. While an SRO has significant authority when it comes to safety and security, there are certain aspects of student management and discipline that fall outside of their responsibilities. SROs are not meant to take on the role of a substitute teacher. While they may assist with safety-related activities or interact with students, they're not to replace teachers in the classroom setting. An SRO is not to scare students into acting right by threatening jail. They don't take disruptive students from the classroom to the office, since this is a school administrator responsibility. They won't address a violation of the student handbook, such as dress code or school rules. They also don't issue discipline referrals. An SRO can't issue Class C citations for violations such as fighting and vandalism, nor do they make arrests for those offenses. Our SROs, we have 5 SROs currently in the school district. So out of those 5, 2 of them are at the high school, since that population is higher than the rest. The SROs are not rookies. They're not brand-new officers. The one officer we jokingly call him the senior SRO at the high school. He has 9 years of law enforcement. The other officer, who also graduated from San Marcos High School, has 5 years of law enforcement experience. The Lamar campus, the SRO there has 17 years of law enforcement experience. And then the 2 middle school campuses, each of them have 9 years each, for a combined of 18 years of experience. This proves to be very beneficial because they have those life experiences, they have those law enforcement experiences to be able to de-escalate situations and better understand what's going on in the school. Let me see. So San Marcos CISD and San Marcos Police Department, the SRO unit started in 1999 following the tragic event at Columbine High School. The San Marcos School Board and San Marcos Council review the MOU, which was last signed in 2024, and we maintain an excellent partnership with San Marcos ISD. During the 2023-24 school year, the district sent out a survey regarding SROs, which had 714 students who participated in the survey. Out of those, 431 were from the middle school campuses and 283 were from the high school campus. Out of that survey, 95.2% of the people reporting having either a positive or a neutral experience with their SROs, and over 83% of the students feel comfortable reporting crime to their SROs. The community has made, throughout our Facebook posts and stuff that go online, the community has come up with several positive posts on there, and two of which I've put on here. It says, having you at the schools, knowing that you're watching out for my precious and most valuable possession means the world to me. The other one that I recently took, it says, I would personally like to thank the SRO who did everything he could to help my child. He has no idea that just listening gave us hope when we need it the most.
All right, Mayor and Council. The final slide for me, and then if you want to, I can go through the marijuana decriminalization slides. If not, I'll defer to your time. You have them. It's required by the ordinance that be shared with you. You also get these by email on a quarterly basis, along with your site and release updates. And you also have a dashboard. I provided the hyperlink for the benefit of our citizens on the marijuana decriminalization dashboard. So if anybody has any questions, they can go there and find the information. So I will conclude tonight by simply saying the next initiative for us actually launches tomorrow at 8 a.m. in collaboration with McCoy's Corporate. We're going to be on site. All first-line supervisors, commanders, assistant chiefs, myself, Chief Anderson will be joining us tomorrow morning. We are going to meet for a staff development day, and we're going to dig into dignity in policing. This is a 12-month initiative. That is, it has specific touch points every month provided by an educator with the goal of increasing emotional literacy and emotional regulation. So this is a 12-month program that we actually kick off starting tomorrow. With that, does the mayor or any council member have a question?
So I actually have two quick questions. The 5 SRO officers, do they all have the SBLE proficiency cert from TICO?
Yes, sir, they do. Currently, they have the introductory one. Some have the intermediate, and then that class is only offered during the summertime. So this summer, we'll be advancing, including myself. will be
That's the reason why I
advancing
was asking, because I know that it's usually in the summer, so like, if
Yes,
they're
sir.
not, is the intent to get them certified?
Yes, sir.
And then I also had a question, it popped into my head afterwards, but on the mental health officer certification goal, I know I mentioned, I guess, other than the 24 hours for the actual cert, the requirement for CIT and de-escalation, but both of those have been part of the 4-year training cycle. So correct me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't all our officers have those two by August 1st anyways?
I don't even want to hazard a guess. If you were to look at our organization and you were to go into the TCLEDs, and you know what I'm referring to, you would see that every officer is at a different stage.
Right.
Because we're hiring every year. So we have basic officers, we have intermediate officers, we have advanced officers, and we have masterpiece officers. Every one of them needs something different. And so that's what Chief Weekend Order was trying to sensitize you to. The goal is to certify all eligible as mental health officers who provide frontline services, giving us about 87 total. How we get there is different for every employee.
I guess my question was more, how many officers need more than the 24-hour mental health?
I don't know that we have that answer, do we? Come
But
on
they
up,
can
Chief.
get that to us later.
We don't, and that's what the training department had to go through. The best I can tell you is like anybody who's gone to the academy in the last 2 years has the easiest route.
Right.
Somebody like me with 27 years, I've got the longest route. I have the de-escalation, I have the 16 hours, but that 16 hours in crisis intervention, TCOL doesn't have it anymore.
Right.
So now I have to go redo the 40, and then I have to redo the 8, and then I have to do the 24. So
Yeah, so
it's different.
I guess that's kind of how it was playing out in my head. So it's more the senior officers that, because I know the 40-hour course and the, what is it, 8-hour course have been part of the BPOC, I think, since 2021-ish.
Yes.
But they've been part of the proficiency certificate since like 2015, 2017. So if you got intermediate, advanced, or master's since 2015, you should have them. But if you got any of those certificates prior to 2015, then I
Correct.
guess they're in the same boat that you're in right now.
Correct. Like, I don't know when it was when TCOL changed, but you had so many folks that had the master's
Right.
certificate, and if you had it, you didn't have to go through those.
Right.
You could use the older ones, but now we have to bring everybody up to that new one.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, it's complicated. The training division
Right.
blew my head with all the different classes when I asked that question.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yeah, I know we're having a follow-up with some other stuff, and so I would ask that, it was mentioned earlier about the need to reflect inwardly and to have a sense of accountability, because we understand that that fosters trust with our community. But I was troubled to see that when we talk about even use of force, Malachi Williams' death wasn't even on there. And so I want to know personally, and I know people, considering we had people come last time to speak about that very passionately, I would really like to understand how that whole incident was reflected on inwardly, and what the department plans to do to actually address that with the community. So if that could be included when we have further discussions, I'd really be interested to hear that.
I will take my cue from the city manager and do what she wishes.
I have a lot more questions, but we can deal with it with CJ and CJR committee. Oh, I didn't know if you were going to answer that.
Yeah.
I think it's really, I mean, it wouldn't be something that we would necessarily be able to unpack today
Oh,
in
for sure.
regard to that particular incident. I mean, we all regret that the incident ended in life lost. And we can always, from every incident, we can always look and see what things could be done differently. And that is something that I know that we are constantly asking the questions about. So that is something we work on and talk about all the time in regard to any incident that we do. The one thing that I will say is that what I have noticed in being within this position, because I wasn't always involved in police matters in my prior positions, and one thing that I have always appreciated and understood more is that you always have the benefit of time that some of us don't always have at the time certain decisions are made. And yes, at the time that you see that more information has come out, you think, okay, well, maybe I would have acted differently and under those certain circumstances, or maybe we would have handled something differently. But you don't always have the benefit of that at the time that you're making some of those split-second decisions. And so that is something that we have to continuously be in a learning mode and understanding, how do we provide mental health training to our officers? How do we look and ensure that, and we're dealing with members of the public, what does our body language look like? How do we do certain things? How do we approach people? Those kinds of things. So again, there's always that thing that we have to understand how it's all relational. So I would say that should be true of any incident, not just that one incident. That should be true of any police interaction that we have, is trying to make sure that we're looking at it from the relational aspect of how we are interacting and how we provide the best service that we possibly can to whoever it is that we're interacting with at the time.
Okay. I would like to thank everyone who participated in putting the presentation together. Clearly, there was a lot of time and effort and work. Thank you to all the presenters, and we thank you for what you do. And at this point, we will close out item 2. Council, it is 5:54. I'm going to check and see if there's anyone, we will not be doing executive session now. That's, for those of you, we always post it on the 6 o'clock meeting also, so we'll be doing our executive session after the 6 o'clock meeting. So I will move on to question and answer. Do we have anyone for question and answer? We had one person sign up, and I see none. So at this point, I'm going to adjourn this meeting because we are at the end of our agenda. I'm going to adjourn us at 5:54. Council, let's take